to fonts, it'll open the website for you. It's actually a website previously called Typekit, and Adobe bought it and is now, I think it's called Adobe Type. And there's probably a few thousand fonts in there. You can enter your search criteria. You can enter your text that you're trying to style and see how it will look in different fonts and preview it. And then there's actually just a little toggle that says activate. And that's it. It just downloads to your computer automatically. You don't need font activation software like Suitcase or anything like that. That's super fancy. You don't have to go into your operating system and manually load the fonts. Adobe takes care of it. And the only thing to keep in mind is if you don't have internet access or you cancel your subscription or put it on hold for any reason, those fonts will be deactivated and you won't have access to them until you reestablish your Adobe account. So it's something to keep in mind in there. But that's a great resource down here. And you also have things like Behance that'll allow you to create your own portfolio and put it online, as well as access to Adobe stock. And I believe there's some freebie stock images on there to get started with, as well as tutorials, all kinds of fun stuff. But hey, you didn't come here to learn about the Creative Cloud. So let's stop that for a second and go back here. And okay, great. So there. And here we go. We'll dive in here, and then I will we'll open this up to questions here in a minute. But hopefully you guys are here. And oh, it says live on YouTube. Hey everybody! I think we're on YouTube, Facebook, wherever we're on. If you're just joining us, welcome. This is Intro to Adobe Photoshop. What we call the Adobe Photoshop 101 class. My name is John Knowles, and this is day one of the full course. If you like what you see, check out keycodeeducation.com. For either to take the rest of this class, the rest of this weekend, or to look at future class dates if you're interested. It'd be myself or someone else teaching this course here. And let's move on. So let's jump into Photoshop, and I will jump over there. And I'll go back in here to share screen. And I will open up that thing, wherever that, there we go. Okay, boom. All right, so we're here in Photoshop. And you can see I've got a lot of images that I was previously playing with in here. Anything you have previously last opened, will be available in here as an option. Got some terrible memes that I was creating and some family photos that I was redoing and things like that. Some old family photos that I was trying to fix up. And this Naked Magicians thing, I apologize. That was a birthday card for my mother. Anyway, moving on. There's also the Learn tab here when you first open it, and there's all kinds of videos in here. If you're tired of listening to my voice, you can always click on and watch one of these things. These are just quick videos from Adobe that will open up in a web browser. Most people jump to YouTube anyway when they're trying to learn new software, but they don't realize that there's a lot of great stuff just packed into the software when you get it and you're paying for all this. So I say dive in here and use it. Most of these are relatively short, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. 15. I think the longest in here is maybe 20. That's a really easy tutorial to sit and watch and to get more information. So feel free to jump in there at any point as well. You also notice over here on the left under Home, Learn, we also have LR Photos. That will actually tap into your Lightroom library. Remember I said those two applications work really well together. They're actually tied together in this way. You can open your Lightroom photos. There we go. There's some stuff that I've been working on in Lightroom. I've got some artwork that I've been creating, and this is a series of photos I took at an event for a friend's upcoming documentary about Gloria Swanson. And so that's all in I have a very small Lightroom library right now, but you can jump right into your Lightroom photo library and open anything that's in there directly into Photoshop. And conversely, when you're in Lightroom, you can just pop anything in Lightroom over to Photoshop and work at it and save it and jump it back in. Very, very nice connection between those two pieces of software. And then finishing out our tour here, we've got Create New and Open. So if I say Open, that'll just take me right to a window where I can open up everything. And I'm going to pop into, there we go, Lesson Plans. And there we go, I happen to know that there. This little, if you're in Mac OS, by the way, this little kind of skinned application on top of my Finder window. This is called Default Folder X. It is worth every penny. I love it. It gives me a lot of great shortcuts, well worth looking into. As an intro, let's just open, and I think for the students in this class, you should have been given this link. So go ahead and pop into folder 1 that was there. That was the Dropbox link. And let's look at this coffee image. So CMYK coffee, I'm just going to open that. And it's thinking hard because I have a lot of applications running at the same time. There we go. Simple open command. Now I can also go to and make a new image. I'm going to close that. And instead of opening something, I'll just create new. And however you get to new document, you can click that button, or it's always under file here under new, Command N on the Mac. That's probably Windows N on Windows. Here's the new document palette right here. Let's start something new. That's great. You're taking up too much space. Let's get rid of you. Okay, great. So here are some basic setups in here. You notice it starts with recent, which is nice. So anything that I've created recently as a document size lives in here in the recent folders. You can see I've been doing a lot of video work. I have a lot of 1920 by 1080 things going on here, or 1080 by 1080 for Instagram, for example. Anything I've created recently will be in here, or if I've saved my own template, which I do have some in here. And you can see I've got 5K, Instagram Square. Those are templates that I've made for myself and saved into this templates folder. They also give you presets. So I want to create a folder. I want to create a photograph, for example, landscape, photos, different sizes. You'll notice that there are two different sizes here with these. And this is, we're going to get into document sizes in a minute. And this is an important thing that we're going to cover. What does size actually mean in Photoshop? And it's something that a lot of people have questions on, something a lot of people get tripped up on. We're going to cover that here in a second. So you'll notice right away with photographs, there is a physical size and then a resolution here. You can see 7 by 5 inches at 300, 3 by 2 inches at 300. What does that mean? We're going to get to that. Okay. Same thing here for print. Remember, I said you can do simple documents in Photoshop. Absolutely. You've got letter size paper, legal size paper, 11 by 17. You want to make a poster. You get into the European sizes, A5, A6, A3, B5, for example. That's all in millimeters. So you can see there's some basic setups for various page sizes in here. If you create a lettered size document, you can guarantee that will print out just fine in your laser printer at home. Art and illustration, so on and so forth. And these are all in pixels. And we notice we get into web, the resolution has dropped, and we are not dealing with physical sizes. We are dealing with these much, much larger numbers, and the PX stands for pixel. Again, what does that mean? Don't worry, we're going to get there. And there's also presets for mobile. So we've got all kinds of phones in here. This is iPhone X. This is mostly Apple, but I think there's some Android stuff in here somewhere. And film and video are the common sizes for film and video. If you are going to build graphics for your video projects, this is a great place to start. Just jump right over here, and right at the top of the bat, top left, high definition television, 1080p, and there you go. And then you've got a perfect HD frame size to work with. If you want to work in 720, that's right next to it, for example. If you're going to work in 4K, 2K, these are all options. And if you're not seeing what you want, you can search right here for more templates on the Adobe stock site. Some of those will be free if you're looking for something very, very specific. If someone has made a template for a 3-fold flyer, for example, or someone's made some specific Instagram templates, you can type that in and see if someone's made that available, and you can drop that in. And you're not stuck with what is on here. You can simply go over here and check the fine print over here on the side. This is what comes up. You notice these numbers here on the right change depending on what I click. So this is my video preset, 1920 by 1080. I'm getting a pixel size right here and a resolution and a color mode. Remember I mentioned this earlier, RGB, CMYK. Okay, there's also grayscale, bitmap, lab, which we won't really cover. That's some more. If you need lab, you know you need lab. Otherwise, no need to click on that. And again, we don't want to really work in CMYK. We want to work in RGB because we want to have that larger donut of color to work with and not the smaller CMYK image. If you want to work completely in grayscale, you're welcome to do that. You can create a grayscale image right off the bat. And then the pixel bit size, 8-bit, 16-bit, 32. All I'll say about this is it adds a lot of file size. And you can work in 8-bit all day and be totally fine. And most of what you create is going to be fine. If you definitely know you're going to be creating something that's a little more high end, or you know for sure that let's say the final product has to work in a 16-bit or a 32-bit environment, you can select that right now. And you want to do this at the beginning. You don't want to wait till the end to try and change that. You want to bake this in from the start so you're working with more information. But be aware, you are adding a lot of file size, especially at 32. Don't just select that from jump, and then you're wondering why you have something that may even be a gigabyte in size by the time you're finished with it. So if you don't know, you can always work in 8-bit. Should be just fine. Works for most video applications for sure. Higher end graphics, higher end larger print jobs, for example, you're making a pretty big poster, you may want to ask the specifications if you should be working in 16, for example. And some higher end motion graphics for After Effects, for example, might also require 16. But we're going to keep it at 8. There's also a quick orientation option here. You can flip back and forth between landscape or horizontal right here. And you notice the height and the width will just transpose themselves automatically. Okay, that's pretty handy. We're going to keep it horizontal and keep the resolution 72. Again, we're going to cover this. Artboards, I leave this unchecked. I'll show you what those do in a minute. I don't find them particularly useful in Photoshop, but you may, depending on the application that you're working on. I'll show you what those are. I find them more of a hindrance than anything, but for some applications, they are useful. I can get this set up. I can actually name this right now if I want. I can call this video HD. And if I click this button over here, it will save it. And I'll give that video HD. I'll call it 1080. Save the preset, and that's good to go. And guess what? Boom, there it is, right there in my saved window. So rather than go through and type all this stuff in again, if you're doing with, especially with a custom page size that you know you're working with, go ahead over here, jump into this and save a preset, especially for some of your more commonly used frame sizes. Okay, so we're going to work with that, and I'm going to hit create, and now I have brand new document. So here we are in the interface, and I'm going to just jump out here. I'm going to stop my share really quick and make sure I have any questions. Okay, great. All right, so I'll open this up for questions here in a second. Let me go back to the screen. Let's just do some stuff here first before we jump into anything else. All right, back into my Photoshop. Bear with me. Here we go. All right, so we're back here. So this is the basic setup here, and I'm going to, let's see, hide everything from Zoom. There we go. Okay, there we go. And let me turn off my notifications because my friends are bugging me right now because it's Friday night and we need to make that go away. There we go. Okay, turn off my night shift. All right, we're here. We're back. We're back. Okay, so here's the basic application frame. By the way, I'm in Adobe Photoshop 2019 right now. I'm in CC version 20.09. I will open up the newer version probably tomorrow. I had some issues and I don't want to restart the whole computer right now. So like I said, most versions of the software are the same. And for what we're doing today, we don't need any of the newer features that just got released. So let's just focus on the basics, and this application frame I think is pretty consistent on the new versions. So what do we have going on here? We have a toolbar over here on the left. I'll go to my pointer, and that's holds all of the palettes here. I have the main, what we call the application frame here. The application frame is under Window, and you can see that there. That actually docks the main window as part of the application. So you don't see the rest of your desktop. I actually find this horribly distracting. So let's set it back the way it was. I don't want to see the rest of my stuff. I want to just focus on Photoshop and just see it nice and full, the whole image here. And below that, in my main window, I can see rulers. I have my pixel rulers here. I can turn those on and off. The command for that on a Mac is Command R for ruler. Pretty easy to remember. If we go under View, it is right here, rulers. Okay, very, very simple. Turn those on, turn those off. And we have the name of our document right here at the top. And if I create a new document, they're just going to keep opening in tabs. So I'll just go back, jump into new here really quick, create, and you'll see a second one. Boom, there it is. Okay, I didn't even check the size. That's a really wonky size, but you get the idea. That's the second document. And again, they appear in tabs. If I'm going to close one of them, I just click the little X and it goes away. The little asterisks, did I say that correctly? After the name of the video file up here, lets you know that this file has not been saved, that you have unsaved changes. If I hit save right now, it's actually, we didn't tell it where to go. I'm actually going to save it right into that folder. And now it's gone. And if I do something else, the asterisks will come back and let me know I need to hit save in this application. It's also telling me what scale I'm viewing it at. It says at 100%. full size. If I start zooming in, it's going to tell me the exact scale I'm looking at it. And there is a shortcut, by the way. I'm really big on keyboard shortcuts, so I will let you know what they are as we go. This is a favorite of mine. So this is Command Option or Command Alt on Windows, and it is Command Option 0. I'm going to enlarge it. Actually, I'm going to go the other way. Zoom out. Command Option 0 pops it to 100%. So whatever your screen resolution is set to, this is 1 pixel for 1 pixel. This is showing you the image at full size. It's a great way to see exactly what you're going to get on the size screen that you're working on if you're targeting a certain size screen. Next to that is the color space, says RGB, and then that little /8 means I have an 8-bit image. If I had made a 16 or 32, it would say 16 or 32 after that. So going up above here, this is known as the options bar. And again, you can make that go away. That's under Window, Options, boom, that's gone. I like to keep it open. Doesn't take up a lot of space. It's nice to have. A lot of the Adobe apps have something like this across the top now, whether it's Dreamweaver, Illustrator. Most of them have some kind of options bar across the top. They've done a great job taking all these different pieces of software and giving them a very concise and consistent UI finally across all of them, because they were not all written by Adobe back in the day. Little trivia for you there. Anyway, moving on. Over here on the right, we have our palettes. Not all of the palettes are available. If we go into Window, we can see what is open right now, and very few. If there's a check mark next to it, then it is available or it's currently open. And if I go, say, to Channels, there's Channels. I can see Channels right there, Paths, and so on and so forth. You can add new panels to these. You can turn things on. If I go into Window and go to, I believe, Libraries probably isn't open. There's Libraries right there. That's just one example. If I go back here to Windows, Glyphs, sure, why not? There we go, there's Glyphs. So these different things will pop up. And there's two palette bars here. The wide is kind of for the farthest to the right is usually popped open wide. And that's the one you probably wind up using more often than not. I like to keep that pretty small. I like having my layers really, really large. You can see I have a really deep layers palette here, even though I have one layer. Channels and paths usually fall in there. And there's very few pieces in here. And then there's this second one that's a little skinnier. And you see that you don't see the full Windows palette. It's actually represented by an icon. And if you click on it, it will fly out like so. And these little double arrows, whenever you see them in the application, you click on it and it collapses that palette back into the main window shape. And you can see there's actually double arrows up here at the top. So if I click on that, it actually pops that skinnier palette as wide as its brother right here next to it. And I can even shrink that other palette over here. And you can see it's actually wide enough to put names next to what these things are. This one is not. And if I hover, my screen's a little dark, but there are black lines separating these palettes from each other. And if I pull this one wider, you can see the names of what those palettes are. This is all up to you to customize. It's completely your call, and you can move things back and forth. If I want character to be in the right sidebar instead of the left, I just drag and drop. That's it. These blue lines are telling me where things are going. I pull libraries over here. You can see it's blue. If I pull it above character, it's going to be above character, and so on and so forth. Boom, there we go. Just like that, move it back and forth. I can skinny this back up so it's just down to the icons, pop this guy back open, and now I've got all this stuff down in here. I can go back up to my layers palette. If I double click on something, it will collapse. So that's a way to have a lot of things in here, but only see the one that you want to see. So I'm going to collapse libraries and character. You see they're all very, very skinny right now. It's just the tab as if you were going through a file drawer and just looking at the tabs on the folders. I want to pop something open. I just double click and there it is. Now, this whole arrangement in Adobe Photoshop is known as a workspace. If you're using other Adobe programs, you may be familiar with Workspace. It's also available in applications like Illustrator, but also After Effects, Premiere Pro, Dreamweaver, for example. This arrangement of palettes is known as a workspace, and you can get to different ones up here. And see in the top right, there's this icon, looks kind of like our page with our toolbar. If I click on that down arrow, I can see different names. These are all custom workspaces. I have mine at the top here. That's one that I've saved. This one is called Essentials, Graphics and Web. photography. These are all workspaces that Adobe Photoshop has given you kind of out of the box. You don't have to use them. You can certainly click on it. I'll go to painting. And if I want, you can see it's kind of defaulted to something that maybe I would use for more painting. My brushes and my color swatches, for example, those are kind of my go-to tools for painting. But if I want to go to back over here and go to photography, it's going to change up the palettes and give me more something that may be more in line with working on photographs. So these are all up to you. I'm going to go back to my custom workspace, which is this. And if you want to change something in here and then save it, you have the option. You can go to new workspace and make a new one. Once you get all your palettes set up the way you want them, you just go to new workspace and save it that way. And or if you want to, let's see, I believe there's a workspace here. And if you go to the window and workspace menu, you've got the same options up here. You can change workspaces, you can reset, and so forth. There is not a way to save the current workspace, the changes to it. So you would go new workspace, and then maybe I would save it as John's workspace number 2, and then that would save itself to the palette. And you can have the option of saving the keyboard shortcuts, the menus, the toolbars, all that kind of good stuff. And it will save it into an easy drop-down palette you can then pull up from here. And that is those are the main things here. And then you've got a little search bar and things there. But that's the basics of the interface. And I have mine full screen, so it goes top to bottom. My dock is hidden down here. In the lower left-hand corner, you can also see a visual indication of the zoom level. We're at 100%. And the document size, which right now is telling me this is 6 megabytes, and it's empty. But at empty, we are at 6 megabytes. You can display different things down here, by the way. I click on this little right arrow. I can go to document dimensions instead and look at that, 1920 by 1080. I can also go away, doc. I can look at my current tool, timing, save progress, smart objects, layer count. I've got lots of options in here. I generally just use the top 2 or 3, but those are the options there. We will not get to all of the tools probably in this class. We're going to get through as many as we can, but there are some big ones that we're going to talk about that are the major tools for the application. And we're going to start with the top 2 here before the night is over. All right, so I'll stop the screen here really quick and let's check in with everybody. Any questions before we move on so far from my class attendees? And the answer can be no, that's totally fine. Let me check my folder over here. Make sure I'm on the right page. Where am I? I've lost my cursor because I have too many monitors going. There we go. Okay. Okay. Yep. There we go. Okay. Get that. All right. I don't see anything in the chat, so I think we're good. We're going to go from there. And actually, I will pull. Let's see. Can I see the chat on top of the screen sharing? I'll figure that out. Don't worry. All right. Talking to myself. Sorry. I do that a lot. Okay. So moving on, let's jump into back into our application here. I'll go back to screen share, and there we go. Okay, and we're going to go back into Photoshop here. Nope, not that, not that. Where are we? There we go. Okay. All right, so we're back in Photoshop. Let's talk about image size. I told you we were going to get to it. Let's just jump right in there. It's a big deal and something we definitely need to cover. So let's cover that now. What does image size mean in Photoshop? This actually screws up a lot of people when they're getting started because generally they either work way too big, but more often than not, they work too small and they don't realize they're working too small. They think they have the resolution and they don't have the resolution. So the key thing to keep in mind is when you are working in typical raster image environments, and by that I mean web, video, and anything for digital, which is quite a bit of material now compared to print, for example. If you're working in anything that is meant for a screen, a phone, another computer, a video, whatever it is, you have one resolution to worry about, and that is what is the size of your document in pixels. It's the only thing you need to worry about because the image resolution, there's 2 values. What are the physical dimensions and what is the resolution. And the resolution for most digital work is 72 dpi or 72 ppi, pixels per inch. And that's white text on a white background, and that's not going to do us any good. So let's go there. There we go. Okay, now I can see what I'm typing. 72 ppi is the resolution for most raster images. Why? Because that's what monitors display. It's basically 72 ppi, pixels per inch. You may have a larger monitor, you're just going to see more of those pixels, right? There are people who design for that say this should be something higher, like I think it's 120, because of the newer displays out that can show a lot more pixels. For example, the Retina displays on a lot of the MacBook Pros. If you set that resolution to be very, very high, 72 pixels per inch is very tiny on those screens. But as a base, for the most part, you can design with 72 pixels per inch as the base resolution, because adding more pixels in there doesn't really help you. It's not going to make the image any larger if you don't affect the actual dimensions of it. You're just going to be adding more information to the document that's not going to do you any good. And I'll show you the example of that here right now. If we go under File, actually go under Image and Image Size. Okay, let's play around in here. This is a good place to look at how all this works together. So right now I'm looking at it in inches, and we don't want that with pixels. Again, this matches our preset. When we first set up this document, it was 1920 by 1080 at 72 pixels per inch. I can see all of that information right here. And I have, again, these are the two things that matter, the dimensions and the resolution. And again, when you're dealing in digital, you can ignore resolution, just make sure it's set at the very minimum of 72, but you don't need to go higher than that. You would alter the pixel dimensions if you need to make this larger. If I need to make this a 4K image, I would do something like this, okay, and enlarge it, but I'm keeping the resolution at 72, okay? Because again, the 72 is a resolution of the screen that I'm looking at this on. The screen is not going to hold more resolution than that normally, so there's no point in adding resolution down here. It's not going to change anything. Now notice what happens if I change that, if I do change that, notice that it is actually changing the pixel size because I'm adding more pixels per inch, so the pixel size is getting messed up here. Okay, so I'm going to go back to 1920 by 1080 at that resolution. And see, every time I do that, it changes it, right? We don't want that. We want to keep things at that size. So by changing the resolution, I'm messing with my dimensions. So how do we avoid that? You just type in the dimensions you want and you leave the resolution alone, okay? And you can change sets. If you're joining us from Europe, you can certainly choose centimeters. We're not going to be very imperial about that. So if we want to make this document a whole lot larger, you just type in the new custom size in here. Now, when is the resolution important? The resolution is important when we go into print, because we don't want a 72 dpi image when it comes out of another device. That device actually has a resolution in mind. It has image quality in mind. A laser printer, for example, usually the minimum on a laser printer is 300 dpi. That's actually an old school figure. Right now, they're at least 600. And you can see that when you go to laser print something, it asks you what the resolution is: 300 by 300, 600 by 600, 1200 by 1200. It can go much, much higher resolution. And certainly if we're printing something on a press, we want this number to be at least that high, generally 300. And then we would actually see what we're doing here in inches, okay? That's where the only reason to do it like this, again, is if you're printing. If I'm printing, then I actually care what physical size this piece is. This is 9 by 6 at 5 by 4. I can make this 8.5 wide. It'll be a skinnier image. And you can see above here, the image size is changing depending on how I manipulate all of this, okay? I can mess around with this for days, but you get the idea. All these values go hand in hand here. The minute you change one, you're changing the other. And you can see this is a monster file. This is just jumped from 6 megabytes to 362 because I made it 50 inches wide at 300 pixels per inch. Now, I may want to print this. This might be a giant poster. That's fine. But again, that's for print. If we're actually taking our image and sending it to a device to be output in the real world, in the physical world, then we care about the physical dimensions and we would change it to a physical dimension, inches, centimeters, millimeters, for example. Otherwise, if it's destined for a screen, we leave it at pixels and we leave the resolution at 72, and then you just have to worry about the overall dimensions. And again, the reason why I say that is if I'm gonna, so look at this image right now, I'm gonna go back to 1920 by 1080. Okay, resolution is at 72. This image size is just under 6 megabytes. I'm gonna jack this resolution up really, really high to 800, but reset the file size. Now, notice what happens when I do this, or hopefully you're following along on your end. Notice the image size. Did it change? No, it didn't, because again, in the digital space, in the raster space that we're dealing with just pixels, changing the resolution of the image to make it larger, but keeping the same pixel dimensions, the same pixel size, that higher resolution just did absolutely nothing, because all Photoshop cares about is how large the image is based on a 72 DPI screen, and adding more PPI in this case is not changing the overall image size. It's actually just adding more resolution that's not really there. And this extra resolution does not mean, oh, I can then take this 1920 by 1080 image and then make it 4K, 5K, 8K, make it monstrous. I don't have that extra resolution. This is still a 6 megabyte file. It's the exact same size. Adding this resolution did nothing. So don't let that trip you up. Again, pardon the police sirens. I live in a very busy street. Simple rule of thumb. Are you printing this? Yes or no? If you're printing this, then when you make your image, you want to be focused on the actual physical size. You're going to be working in inches or in millimeters, and then adding enough resolution for your output device. Again, start at 300. I've gone as high as 600 just to get a really nice, crisp, big image when it comes out the other end. But working this way, you also see that file sizes get much larger, because again, we're working in raster, not vector. So by making this page 8.5 wide, I'll uncheck this box. By the way, this little chain here links these two pieces together. If I undo the chain, I can mess with the size. It's going to squeeze it, but that is a normal piece of paper. And change this document resolution to 600, and that is a 96 megabyte image, up from 6 megabytes. And again, I'm only doing this because I want to print this out of my laser printer. You can see what adding that much resolution does to an image. Whereas if I just want to use this on the web, I can change that back to 72, and I'm fine. That's 2 megabytes. That's nothing. That's a very, very small file. So again, are you printing it? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, you care about the physical dimensions and change it to inches or millimeters. If it is just destined for a screen, for the web, for a phone, for a video, you want to change this to pixels and leave the resolution at 72, and then change the physical size right here. Okay, very important thing to note. All right, so I'm going to hit cancel. And again, that was under image size, or in my case, that was Option or Alt Command I. There's also canvas size. What is the difference? Image size, as you could tell, was just physically manipulating this image. I'm going to actually make it larger so we can see what happened here. I'm going to just go like that, and that almost doubled it in size. Boom, there it is. You can see the difference there. That just went. I'll go back. I'll hit Command Z, undo, and I'll hit redo. Boom, there we go. Okay, I've just made the document physically larger. It's a much larger image, takes up more file space. What is the canvas size? That is the window. If you think of making the window larger or smaller, but keeping the document exactly the same as it was, we go under image canvas size. And now I have a different type of box. This is not the size of the image per se. This is how big is the window that I'm looking at it with. And I can make this smaller, for example, and notice these two are not linked. So I can manipulate these pretty easily independently of each other. I'll make that smaller as well. But I can link them this way. So below that, and it's telling me it's going to shrink it. And it's this box below where it says anchor is asking me, how do you want to shrink it? And this is saying from the outside in with the center as the anchor. I can also shrink it from, let's say, the bottom right corner up to the top left, and so on and so forth. You can just click in the box where you want that anchor point to be. Maybe I want to shrink this from a corner instead of the middle, for example, but this will shrink it from the middle, and I should get a warning. Oh, it didn't give me a warning. I think I turned my warnings off. It will warn you when you're making it smaller than what you had before, or larger. And I can make this, I'll make this really big here, make that a layer. And then so I go back and I make my canvas size a whole heck of a lot bigger. See that? And also that did change the image size because I am adding more pixels around it. And now you can see that. Now I didn't change the dimensions of the original image and I didn't change the artwork. I just added more space around it on all four sides. So that is affecting the canvas. And the canvas simply is just the boundaries of the image. And you can change the boundaries without physically manipulating the size of the artwork that was there. So if you need to physically enlarge the entire piece, that's the image size, or shrink it, that's image size. If you just want to add more room around it, or actually take that room away, that is canvas size. And we can go, I'll go the other way. All right, and I'll make this a lot smaller, like so. There, I've just shrunk the whole thing. My canvas is now smaller than my original artwork, and I actually can't see what I have anymore. I believe I turn my warning off. Usually there's warnings when you do that. I think I turned it off in my preferences. It's going to tell you, hey, you're shrinking this. You're actually cutting into your artwork. Are you okay with that? But the nice thing is my artwork is all still there. It's just hidden because I've shrunk the boundaries of this outer window. Okay. And so by way of example, let's, let me close this and let's go ahead. I'm not going to save it. Let's go into this folder here and we'll deal with, we'll get out of the intro. If you're following along in image size in these documents, there are two images in here. Let's take a look at those. So that's in folder number 2, image size. And I believe there are 2 cities in China, this Tianjin and large and small. So go ahead and open both. I can shift click and open 2 documents at the same time, which is nice. I just click on them both and they both open in tabs. Okay. And I want to make sure I'm looking at both of them at 100%. And again, that option is, that command is option command 0. Yep. That's at 100%. The large one I'm not. So I'm going to do that 100%. Okay. That gives me a pretty good example of what it means to have more file size, more resolution. So let's go to the small one right here. This is Tianjin small JPEG. This is at 100% size. If I go to my image size, what do we got here? 640 by 360. It's set to 300 pixels here. Okay. And I'm going to turn off this button that says resample. We can see what changing all of this does. You can see it automatically defaulted to inches and pixels is grayed out. Resampling allows you to change the resolution without affecting, and it actually affects the physical size of it. And again, we're not going into print, so we're not going to deal with that. We're going to go back in here, image size. So we want to keep resample checked, okay? But you can see here, it's 675K. It's not even a megabyte. All right, it's a very small image, 640 by 360. It's not even HD size in video terms. It's got 300 pixels of resolution, but that's not giving me any benefits here. So if I reset that to 72, go back to 640 by 360, it's the exact same file size. So that again, that extra, that 300 in the resolution block didn't do me any good because at the same pixel size, it's not adding anything to it. I can't take this image and make it larger. So I'm going to say, okay, leave it there. It doesn't change a thing because again, that 300 was meaningless. If we go into the large version of that file and go to image size, let's take a look in there. Okay, that is 7120 by 4013 pixels. That is an 81 megabyte file compared to the other one that was 600K. And you can see, obviously, this is at 100%. Okay, this looks pretty good. This is a nice image. I mean, it's starting to fall apart a little bit, but I can pull back and, oh my God, that looks amazing. It's a great photograph. You can see a lot of detail, and this is a nice, crisp image. That's just massive. I think this is bigger than most people's monitors. So at 100%, this looks amazing. This is like a brilliant piece of computer wallpaper compared to the smaller version of it. And this is where where we talked earlier about raster versus vector and why you want to start big and then work smaller as opposed to the other way around. Why? I can't add resolution to this image. I can't make this guy look like this guy, because if I enlarge it, I'm zooming in, look at the difference, right? Nasty. That's just nasty compared to this. I'll try to get them to about the same. Look at the difference in detail. Nothing there. Absolutely nothing there. Okay, compared to that. All right, got some nice photo grain. Pull back a little bit. I can still see a lot. I can see individual windows in these buildings, even in the shadows. I go over here. I got none of that. I just have giant blobs. You cannot add resolution to an image once it's been set. So if you start with an image this small, and again, the client comes back and says, hey, that's great. Can we blow that image up? Make it much, much larger. I want that to fill a larger space. I want to make a bigger poster out of it. I want it to be a two-page spread instead of a thumbnail on one page. If you started small, you got to start all over again because you've lost all of this resolution. And if I think I can cheat by adding resolution, by making the image size larger, I'm going to be disappointed. So I'm going to go here, double check my image size. And again, in the original, this is 7120 is the width. So I will blow up this small one to be the same size, and we'll see what we get, but I don't think we're going to get anywhere. Ugh. No bueno. Okay. That was trying to add resolution back into a smaller image, and that got us nowhere. That still looks as horrible as it did at its original smaller size. So to reiterate, you cannot go in and make small images much, much larger and expect them to hold together. They're going to fall apart. They're going to tear. You're going to see just giant chunky pixels. You can't add resolution to an image that's already fixed. And again, this is a limitation with raster images. You need to start big. Even if you're not going to use it that big, you need to start as large as humanly possible. And this is why, professional photographers back in the day would use really big pieces of film. If you're familiar with photography back in the olden days, 2.25, 4x5 transparencies, really, really nice monster images. And then when we transitioned to digital, this is where the megapixels come in, right? This could be an image from a 12 megapixel camera, 10 megapixels, larger, 25 megapixels. You're going to get a nice giant image with lots of detail compared to this, which looks like it was taken on a crummy phone from 2007. So you get the idea. You have to start big, and then you can always take it down, but you can't make things back up. And the old adage is garbage in, garbage out. You start with something that's not going to work. It's never going to work the whole way through. You've got to find another image. You've got to find the larger version of the image. You can't start too small. And sorry, drink of water real quick. This is my voice before the end of the weekend. I see this a lot when people want to work on image files that they pull from the web for presentations and things like that. And they pull something that looks great at a small size. It might look really good on their phone, for example. But once you get into Photoshop and you start designing for larger screens, let's say you're making a PowerPoint presentation for a conference room, and that's going to be on a giant monitor that's at 4K resolution. An image like this isn't going to cut the mustard. An image like this is barely going to take up maybe an eighth of the screen, probably a lot smaller. It's not going to work. And then you make the image enlarged to fit the whole screen, it's going to fall apart. You're going to see this. So again, you want to check the image dimensions that you're working with when you're pulling these images in. And one of the nice things about Google search, so if you are pulling images off the web, and I'm not saying you should steal photographs by any means, but if you are looking for images on here, and we go to Google and we just go to sunset photo, for example, there is this tools option up here. If you're not aware, if you click on tools, you can, let me go to images, sorry. So now I'm looking at photographs. I can go to tools and I can actually change the size that I'm looking at. So I'm gonna go to large. Okay, and now when I click on this image here, it's showing me something that's relatively, it's nice and big. That's nice and big. If I hover, see, so these are much, much larger images, 1000 by 1700, 4000 by 25. I can see that resolution there. I know that that's going to be a nice, big, crisp image. If I just leave it as any size, I don't know what these are going to be. They could be terrible. They could be really small. Yeah, see this one, 595 by 340. That's not really that large. It looks nice in this little preview window here, but if I download that and start manipulating it, I'm going to see some limitations right off the bat. Google kind of hides this information from you when you start searching. Most people don't look at this little pop-up here, and they just assume that this image that looks good in the small size is going to work for them. You have to look at the actual pixel size of any image you're going to be bringing in and determine if it's large enough for you. And if you go to some of the free photo sites like Pexels, for example, that's a big one. These are all free images. We'll look for sunsets on there. And if you go there, it will tell you what size you're dealing with. So this is a nice one. And I can see, if I go to info here, look at that, nice, 4,000 by 3264. Telling you that's gonna be a nice big image. I can even see from the size of it, 31 megabytes. It's a really nice size file. I'm gonna get something good there, and again, that is free. So pixel size again, super important. And as we can see, if we start too small, we're gonna get something that looks absolutely terrible. So let me do this. Flip back over here. And Jessica and Joe, any questions? I'll give you just a few seconds here to sound off in the chat. If not, we'll keep flying. And hi everyone on Facebook and YouTube and Zoom and wherever else we are right now. I've lost track. Okay, just making sure you guys are still awake, still with me. I know it's Friday night. I'm so tempted to have a beer right now. Maybe Sunday night we'll do that together, but we'll move on for now. All right, where are we? So we did the tour. We did, okay, so we'll go back and we'll do some of that good stuff. Resizing, resampling. All right, Joe, you're good. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go in and start playing around. I'm gonna go back to my screen here. Thank you, Jessica. Okay, good. Moving on. Here we go. Back into Photoshop. Let's do some actual stuff. I've been talking for over an hour, so let's actually do some things. Okay, great. Here we are. So let's go back in here. We'll share. Okay, here we are. We're back in Photoshop. I'm going to close out these two images. They've done their work. Thank you very much. Go back to open. And let's go out of image size back into the intro. And let's look at a couple of things. I want to just talk about vector and raster here very quickly. So you see there's a raster image and a vector image. They both say Metro logo. If you want to open both of those, just for comparison real quick, we'll do this, we'll move on. Notice that when I open the raster image, I'm sorry, the vector, this is the vector I'm opening. It's actually PDF because Adobe Illustrator, haha, bet you didn't know this. Adobe Illustrator's file format is a secret PDF format. That's actually what it saves at under the hood. It's just called .ai for Adobe Illustrator. It's actually a PDF. So that is asking me what do you want me to do with this vector image when I open it? Because I'm about to rasterize this vector. I'm about to take this vector information and turn it into bitmap. So so I actually can set a resolution now because a vector image does not have an inherent resolution because again, it's just math, it's just lines. How big do you want it? What resolution? And the sky's the limit here. I can make this thing monstrous if I want. I'll leave it here. And again, if I change that, it's not going to do much for me. So I'm going to go here and I'll do something around the 4K size. I don't have that memorized. That's not actual 4K. Don't yell at me. So I couldn't think of it off the top of my head. So used to HD still. And I say, okay. And that opens up and that's the two logos here. This vector logo is nice and crisp. And so is the raster one, but as we start to zoom in, not so good. As you zoom in on a raster image, it starts to fall apart. Okay, I can actually, if I get too close, I'm going to see the individual pixels, right? As compared to the vector image, which will not fall apart quite as much. Now we did rasterize it, so eventually the same thing's going to happen, but it has a lot more resolution. So you can see I can actually dive in a lot deeper before it really starts to fall apart. Okay, like so. But if I open that up in Illustrator, I'm just going to open that up in the background while I'm talking. If I open this original file in Illustrator, you will see the difference because I'll be able to enlarge it much, much bigger. And because again, I'm just dealing with simple shapes. And this is a good example of a vector image. And by the way, these logos, if you're in LA, I'm sure you recognize these. This is the bus and train service. Actually, I happen to be a client of mine, which is why I have the original artwork here. This is a perfect example of a usage for vector. This is their logo. All these shapes can be made with vector. It's just lines. That's all it is. Even the type is reduced to a line for the final. So any solid shapes like this can be made into vector images very, very easily using Adobe Illustrator as compared to, say, a photograph, which would not translate as well. So I'll go in here. Okay, here, Illustrator is open. And I will open the same file. Here, I'm going to go back to, come on now. There we go. There is my thing here, images for class. There we go. And I'm going to open that vector logo again. Here we go. Again, I have a lot of things running it simultaneously now. Okay, so I'm in Illustrator. We're not going to stay in Illustrator all night. I just want to show this to you. And again, if you have the full Adobe suite, if you don't just have Photoshop, you have this tool available to you. You can download it. It's part of your package. And if you are doing work that looks like this, you should seriously think about learning Illustrator next because it will save you a lot of headache. If I go in, I'm going to do the same zoom thing that I did before and notice the difference. Okay, I'm going to hop back into Photoshop. Okay, I'm going to zoom in on the bitmap version of the logo. That's the PSD file. We're going to zoom in here, pull up my zoom tool. We're going to zoom in right here in the middle of our M. You can see how quickly this guy is falling apart. I'm going to go over to my vector image. This is Illustrator. This is the vector version. Look at that. I can keep going as close as I want to. This line will never turn into a bitmap mess. This will stay crisp. This will stay clean. This will be a nice sharp point down to infinity. Because again, this is all math. It is just the computer drawing these lines and redrawing them no matter what size this image is. That is a vector. There's also a command in Illustrator to look at outlines, and you can actually see how things are drawn. This takes away all the color information and just shows me what I have here. I have a circle with some shapes inside the circle that make the M, and I have the word Metro that they originally typed out in their Metro font, and then they changed it to outlines and manipulated it from there. That's all this image is. It's just a collection of lines, almost like a CAD drawing, and this can be scaled to fit the size of a large building or a blimp or whatever you want to throw it on, and it will stay nice and crisp and clean, and compared to this Photoshop document, which will not. You don't want to see this on the side of a building. You want to see something that looks really nice. So by way of example, that was just showing you why vector is better for images like this. And you can work in both in Photoshop, which is nice, and in Illustrator too. I'm just going to quit that. Not going to save anything there. You can always open up vector files in Illustrator, but you just have to give them a resolution. So I'll close that again, like so. This Photoshop file with the logo. Again, I go to image size. I can see what I'm working with, and this is size for video. I have standard 1920 by 1080 at 72 DPI. Pretty basic, 6 megabytes, totally expected, and it's all flattened. It's on one layer over here. That's it. There's no separate elements. If I go to open again, and I'm going to open the vector version of that logo, it wants to assign a size and a resolution. And again, why? Because it has none. Because vector is infinite if it needs to be. So it's asking me in this case, okay, you're about to rasterize this image because you're opening up in Photoshop. How big do you want it? And I can make this as massive as I want. And I can even go into, let's say I'm going to print this. I wouldn't do it this way. I would actually just give someone the Illustrator file, but just by way of example, I can make this 500 inches wide. Oops, oh, I went over the limit. Well, if you're wondering how big you can make this thing, there it is, 444 inches wide. And make the resolution 300 because we're going to print it. And it's thinking about it because this is going to be a massive, massive image. I'm not actually going to hit OK because it's probably going to crash my computer. You can see, but if I were to, in a perfect world, if I hit this right now, it would be OK. And it would open up a massive image There we go. Okay, so at 200 pixels, at 444 inches wide, this would be a 422 megabyte file, but it would look amazing. It would not look nasty and crunchy like that city image did, because that was starting with a small file and enlarging it. This is vector. It's always large. It's always whatever size you need it to be. It's just assigning resolution as you bring it in. So just keep that in mind. If you were going to open up a vector image in Photoshop, you can do it. You just have to tell it how big you want it to be. Okay, so let's close out of here and let's talk some tools. All right, 7:30 here. Let's get into some fun stuff. Right off the bat, let's just manipulate something before we get into things like saving and all that kind of good stuff. We'll get to that later. Let's actually deal with some of the more commonly used tools in Photoshop, and let's talk about selecting an image or a portion of an image. I'm going to go to open. I'm going to go into my class files here. I'm going to get off the intro for now. I don't use all of these. I have them in there just in case. Some of them I may be asking you to pull up later. I'm going to go to pictureframe.psd. Okay, I hit open. Now, normally when we're doing this class in person, I have you do this and then give you like a good 20, 25 minutes to do this on your own. And you can ask questions, and then I usually take a break and go get coffee. But since Zoom hates dead air, we're not going to do it that way. We're simply going to just kind of power on through, and I'll work alongside of you. If you want to work alongside with me, that's fantastic. And that way you can ask questions when this is over if you're running into some problems. But we'll kind of do this together, okay? So what's going on in here? This is like a simple kind of a child's toy. If you've ever had the big giant wooden block that has the outlines for the pieces, and then you have the other pieces that come separately, almost like a puzzle, and you have to drop them into place. All these pieces out here belong somewhere inside this shadow box here. How do we get them there? Well, first of all, we haven't talked about layers much, but over here in the layers palette, it would be nice if we had multiple layers. In other words, this seashell was on a different layer from this sand dollar and this screw and this portion of a shell and this piece of coral. If they were all in different layers, I could just grab them and I could move them around, but they're not, okay? This is one giant piece of artwork. And if I start moving it around, it just all kind of comes together, okay? It's not what I want. I want to actually physically take these pieces that are down below and move them into the top portion. So how do I do that? How do I select these images to move them around? Okay, so selection is a pretty big but basic task in Photoshop, and there's different ways to go about it. The selection tool is over here, and right below this is the move tool at the top, or the transform tool, and below that is the selection tool. I'm going to click on that, and that it looks like a little box with a broken frame, and that is the selection tool. There are options in there. So all the tools, by the way, if you see a little kind of arrow or white checkbox here in the bottom right hand corner, that is a flyout, which means there are other options underneath that tool if you choose to select them. So for example, if I click on that and hold, you can see there's options for that tool. Again, this is called the flyout. Anytime you see that little white thing, you can just click and hold. Do it again. There we go. So I can go rectangle, ellipse, or a single row or a single column. We're going to stay in rectangle for now. That's the easiest one to do. And I'm going to pick one that's really, really simple to grab, which is this screw over here. I want to take the entire image, including this whatever it's screwed into here. This, I think it's metal. I want to take this whole image without any of the white. Okay, so we're going to do that, and I'm going to zoom in close to it. By the way, to zoom, I've been using different keyboard shortcuts. I can share those with you. Right now, I'm holding down the Option or the Alt key, and I am using the middle scroll wheel on my mouse, and it is going right down where my cursor is resting. There is also Command plus or minus using the top of the keyboard will also zoom in or out, okay? Or I'll go back to Command 0, which pops me back to full size. There is the zoom tool, which is the bottom of the palette right here, okay? And I believe that is, yep, so Z is the normal keyboard shortcut for that. It goes to this, and you get the normal zoom tool, which you probably recognize from other applications, and you can simply click down. And to go back out, I'm zoomed in. How do I get back out again? If you hold down the Option key, you notice that the the magnifying glass, which is a plus sign, now changes to a minus, and we can back out of this guy as well. That, by the way, is a program-wide shortcut. If you were dealing with anything that involves magnification or increasing, in other words, a plus sign, the Option key or Alt key, more often than not, will give you the opposite. If you're looking for two different ways to go backwards, you would simply just hold down the Option key, and that will change to the opposite symbol. Okay, something to keep in mind. It's second nature to me. I've been using this program for decades now, and it's just kind of ingrained in my head. I want to back out, I just hold down the Option key and start clicking. It becomes second nature. Okay, all right, so I got this thing nice and big, and I want to center it in my window, and the easy way to do that is to use the hand tool, which is right here, and that is actually the H key. That's nice and simple. The hand tool doesn't change anything at all. It just manipulates my view. Okay, I'm not dragging anything. I'm just changing the actual canvas view right here. And the nice thing about the hand tool is you don't need to actually select it. You can invoke it automatically by using the space bar. And you see that? It just automatically changed the hand tool. And no matter what tool I am on, if I hit space bar, I get the hand. I never hit H anymore because I just use the space bar. And when I'm really working quickly, it's nice to just hit one command like this and move, and then keep using my brush or whatever I'm using without actually changing tools or bothering to go over here and click on the tool itself. Why? Because it takes more time, and time is money. All right, so let's go back to our marquee. Again, the marquee tool, the selection tool, is the second one down, okay, like so. And what can we do with this? This tool draws a box, okay? And you notice that the outlines are moving. They call this the marching ants, okay? The marching ants let you know that you have a selection. And once I've drawn it, okay, I'm just gonna draw a simple box like this. I can see the marching ants. I can move this box independently of anything else on the screen with the same tool. I haven't changed tools. You notice it changes to an arrow in the center, and I can just move it around like so. Okay, I'm moving my selection tool. So on and so forth. This is not affecting the image at all. The marquee is not affecting the image in any way, shape, or form. It is just making a selection. And until you commit to the selection, or until you physically do something with it by adding fill color or using a brush, for example, nothing will change. All right, nothing is going to change. The selection tool is completely non-destructive until you use it for something. Okay, so you can manipulate this all day and never affect your image. You can and so you can spend time kind of auditioning choices. One thing to keep in mind, the minute you click, it's gone, okay? And that drives some people crazy. So this is a muscle memory thing. You have to get used to it. If you select and you're moving too quickly, you can get rid of it, okay? So I'm clicking and dragging, and if I click off of it, it's gonna go away. So I wanna be very careful to not do that. Fortunately, you can undo that. If you accidentally let go of it or click on it too early and it goes away, if you go back to undo, you notice undo deselect is available. And that's what I did, by the way. I deselected it. If I'm making a selection by clicking and dragging, the opposite of that is to deselect, okay? And that is actually, this is how bad it is. I use my keyboard shortcut so much, I'm not even sure where deselect lives in. I'm sure it's in here somewhere, but I just know it as Command D, and it makes it go away. I just deselected it. But the simple way to do it is just to click, and then it goes away. All right. So it can be a little finicky, a little fickle on you. So you have to get used to making selection and learning to not to click too many times, because the selection will go away. Now I'm going to draw a box here. And again, I can just click and drag. Start here in this top left-hand corner, and I'll drag. And I'm going to intentionally go beyond the boundaries. Okay, I move too fast. Oh shoot, I've got too much. I'm going to, if I manipulate this right now, I'm going to have that section of white on the right side and on the bottom. I don't want that. Now I can select again if I want. I'll just click off of it and try again. But honestly, I was pretty happy. I'll hit undo. I was pretty happy with the selection I made in the top left corner here. I shaved off a little bit of it so I can actually move it. Let me just move it up like so. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm cutting into it a little bit, but I want to make sure I don't get any white, so that's fine. I can afford to lose a pixel here and there. But I want to shave off the bottom here. How do I do that? I can manipulate the selection without deselecting it. How do I do that? And again, I mentioned earlier the option key. The option key is available. If I just selected with basically selected a positive by clicking and dragging, if I hold down the option key, I will do the opposite. So go ahead and press option. I hope you're following along with me here at home. Go ahead and press option and notice what happens to the cursor. It is still a crosshair, but it now says minus, which means negative. And that means whatever I click and drag on now, please take it off the selection. Please remove it. Again, we're holding down the option key, which gives me a negative value, just like it did for zoom. And I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to shave off that extra selection portion at the bottom. It looks like I'm doubling up, but when I let go, look at that. I just removed that bottom portion of my selection, and I can do the same thing over here. I'm going to hold down option. I shave that off, and I don't have to do the whole piece. I can take a big chunk out of it. I hold down option and I carve out this square, and now I have this weird kind of notch shape going on here on the upper right hand side. I don't want that. That was a mistake. Oh gosh, I got to redo this again. Aha, no, I don't, because the option, I can actually add to a selection just like I just took it away. If a tool by itself in this program is neutral, in other words, like the zoom tool was plus or minus A or B, positive or negative. The selection tool by its nature is neutral, but we can add or subtract to it. We already subtracted to it. That's the option command. If you want to add to it, that is the shift key. And again, you will see that program wide as well. I'm going to show you this. If you look at your cursor, I held down shift. Now it is a plus. I'm going to add to this selection. I draw a box. I'll try to line it up with my original marching ants here. And I let go. And now I have more or less my square back. Okay, so again, that was shift to get the plus key to add to my selection. And then I can use the option key to quickly subtract. Okay, could have done that in the middle. I can make a donut, well, a square donut shape anyway. We'll get into circles here in a second. I can remove that portion. I've now actually, if I manipulate this frame, you can see I've selected this kind of frame, and whatever I do, if I manipulate this now, it only selects the outer portion, and whatever was in the center is not selected. Okay, so again, I have that kind of donut shape going on here. I didn't want that. I'm going to undo. There are multiple undos in Photoshop, by the way. If you've ever used a really old version of it, you know you only had one undo, and then you had to jump into the history palette, which again is over here, by the way. Sorry, not again, because I didn't mention it at all before. This is this little arrow over here pointing at the squares. That's the history palette, and I can see everything that I've done from jump, including opening the document. This will all be in here until I save and close the document, and the history will be wiped clean. But while I am working, I can jump back to any state of the project. You can see there's all the manipulations that I've been doing since we started this document. So the history palette is your friend. If you're like, oh man, I've really gone on the rabbit hole. I wish I could jump back to 5 moves ago. There you go. Just open up the history palette, figure out where you were. But the undo command now has multiple undos. So you can just kind of, every time you hit undo, it's going to go back a step, back a step, back a step, back a step. Okay. All right. So I see I just deselected by accident. I just wanted to close that panel. Here we go. All right. So I have my selection back here. So now that I've got this this box here selected with my wood screw in the center of it, I would now want to manipulate it. I want something to happen, and because I've selected this portion of the image, that is what's going to be affected by this command. Let's say, for example, I hate this screw, I hate this color, I want to get rid of it, I don't want to ever see it again. I want to fill this block with black. Okay. If I don't select that image and I go up under edit and fill, which is the basic command for filling anything, I want to fill with a foreground color, which by the way is set to black. We'll get into that in a minute. Okay. I've just filled the entire image with the foreground color because I didn't give Photoshop any boundaries. I didn't say only fill this part. I didn't give it that command. I just said fill the whole darn thing because nothing was selected. I'm going to undo. Don't want to do that. Don't want to paint it black. I'm gonna go back and get my selection back. Again, I just hit undo because I knew I had that selected a while ago. And now if I go up under edit, fill, foreground color, aha, I selected something, so the command that I chose affected the selection, okay? I hit undo. So things like that are affected by the selection. For example, if I want to paint the image, okay, I'll unselect. I'll go to the brush tool that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's the brush down here. In my program that is underneath this weird looking Band-Aid thing. And yes, that is a Band-Aid. We'll get to that later. This is the brush tool. The command for that is always B, by the way. If you're following along and you don't see all of these tools, you want to click on these guys right here, and you can edit the toolbar. Actually, we'll talk about that in a second. There's a way to reset all the tools. You may be missing some tools if they're not all there. The brush tool, I think, should always be in there. If you're missing, let me know in the comments. We'll deal with it. So again, B for brush, and I just start painting. And again, I'm painting in black. Okay, but if I go back to my selection, I'll just do it again really quickly here. Go back to this guy and select. Now I go back to my brush tool. Nothing happens over here. Why? Because I've told Photoshop, hey, I made a selection. Whatever I'm doing only applies to that selection. Nothing else can happen out here. But the minute I start painting within the selection, aha, look at that. Okay. I'm only affecting what was selected, and everything else is unaffected. Okay, so that's the power of the selection tool. If I want to very quickly do something like this without affecting the entire image, that's one of the ways we can use selection. And I even know the keyboard shortcut. I'll go back, undo. I know the keyboard shortcut for fill, which happens to be Option Delete, which will fill anything with the foreground color. Again, that was Option or Alt Delete. I'll undo. I can very quickly go nuts here and start making selections and filling, and going crazy. Again, don't want to do all that. Let's undo all this mess. But you get the idea. Whatever is part of the selection, that thing will apply to it. Let's say I wanted to keep this wood screw. I've changed my mind. I've fallen in love with it. I love it now. It's my color. I hate the rest of the image. I make a selection. Well, what do I do here? Do I have to select the whole image and then cut up this, try to cut this out of it? I don't have to do that. I can quickly invert the selection. Okay, so keep an eye on the marching ants here that's around this wood screw block. If I go up under the select menu, I can choose inverse. That's also Shift Command I, and that's kind of what I'm used to doing, which is my muscle memory. And you'll notice, if you were looking closely, the marching ants are now around the entire image in addition to the middle. That's more of that donut situation that we did earlier. That means the entire image except for that block with the screw is now selected. I inverted the selection. And now if I hit fill, I get this, okay? Because I've selected all the image but that original portion of it. Okay, hit undo. I can go back and, whoops, that's the wrong command. I can go back and reselect just the image. I inverted the selection. Again, I can do that all day. Invert, revert, go back and forth like that. Sometimes it's easier to, or faster if you just want, if you know you want to do something in the entire image except for a small portion of it. Sometimes it's easier to select the small portion, invert the selection, and do the work that way. And what else do we have up here under the selection option? There's all kinds of things we can do. And what I want to go down to about halfway down in the selection menu is the modify command. We can modify a selection. And again, you can still see the marching ant. So I haven't let that selection go. That selection is still there. It is still active. And I can modify that guy right now. And one of the things I can do, I can go in and I can say, I need it a little bit bigger. Okay, I can hit expand. Well, how much? Let's go 10 pixels, and that will keep an eye on that marching ants. See that? That just expanded. I should have been that close in the first place. I'll do that again. So I have my selection here. I go up under select, modify, expand, and 10 pixels. I've just added 10 pixels to the boundaries of this image, okay? To my selection, I should say, not the image. I go back under here and I can go the opposite way. So I go back under select, modify, I can contract. And I'll go even more. Instead of 10, I'll go back down by 20, which will add 10, which will take that 10 off and add another 10 or subtract another 10. Now I have a smaller selection. So that's one way to use that and to fine tune it. The other thing I can do here is to, right now that selection is a very, very hard edge. If I go in and do my color fill again, see, I've got a very, very hard edge on that. That's beautiful. That's like a picture frame, right? So by default, those lines have no blur to them. They have no feathering, right? Maybe I want a softer, gentler effect. I don't want that hard edge. This marching ants, this selection does not have to be a hard edge. We can make it soft, and we do that by going to selection, modify, feather. Okay. And how much, and this is going to add a softness to the selection. In this case, yeah, I'm gonna go with 20. That might be overkill, but we're gonna take a look at it. And you'll notice, look at the corners have changed. They've become rounded. That's because the feathering is gonna remove all the sharp edges to the selection, including the corners, especially the corners. So you're gonna get that kind of rounded effect to it. You don't really see the feathering with the selection until you do something to it. So in this case, I'm gonna fill it again. And I'm going to go to, I know my keyboard shortcuts, but I'm going to show you the menus whenever possible here. Edit, fill, foreground color. And look at that now. That is the result of the feathering. And you can see it's almost like spray paint now, or an airbrush, as opposed to the original hard edge. Okay, so that's what feathering does. And if you'll notice in the options tab across the top here, you actually have a built-in feathering style selection here, because people actually use feathering a lot. You can automatically set a feather for anything that you do. I've just selected that, and that you can see that that just rounded off the corners. If I go back here and fill again, everything I draw with this tool is going to be, and fill in is going to be feathered, because I've set the feathering up here. And this is something to keep in mind if you're you actually want hard edges and you're like, oh my God, why does every selection and fill that I make looks like it's been bombed with spray paint? Make sure you haven't actually added a value up here. Go ahead and set that back to 0, and you will get your nice hard edges back. Now we've been drawing squares and things like that. Let me go to my handy history palette and go back to where we belong. And let's just undo that. I'm gonna hit again deselect, which was Command D, got rid of it. We don't have to resign to squares. I can go to ellipse, and I'm going to draw an ellipse. And now that is going to create, if I fill in with black, just so you can see, I've now made an ellipse. Now that is not a perfect circle, because I didn't draw a perfect circle. Is there a way to do that? Of course there is. I'm going to hit undo. Again, get rid of it. By nature, this tool is freehand. So you can see as I'm drawing, it's making different ellipse sizes, different blobs here. I want to constrain this. In other words, I want the height and the width to be the same proportion, because I want to draw a perfect circle. And the way you constrain things is, again, our friend, the Shift key. It has multiple uses in Photoshop. It does add to things. If we're doing selections, it will add to it, right? And go back here. It will also, but if you're drawing, that's once you've selected, and then after the fact, holding down the Shift key will add to the image. I'm making a goofy Mickey Mouse looking shape here. But if you want to use the Shift key as you draw, the Shift key constrains the proportions to be identical. And as long as you hold down the Shift key before you start dragging, it will create a perfect circle. Okay, and that's how you get a perfect circle with any of the selection tools in here. That also works for the rectangle that will draw a perfect square. I'm just holding down the, whoops, did not do what I wanted to do. There we go. As long as you click it first, can't click it after, click it first and then start dragging. I am now making a perfect square. Okay. But I know what you're asking me. You're looking at that screw and you're like, you know what? I just want to take that screw. I just want to select that screw. I don't want the wood or whatever that is, or the distressed metal it's in. I just want to grab that screw. But here's the problem. So I'm going to use a circular marquee here, the ellipse tool, and I'm going to draw my, whoops, I don't want both of those. I'm going to draw my perfect circle, but man, it is drawing from that top corner and I can't get it. I mean, I can drag it after the fact, sure, but man, it would be nice to try and draw this thing from the center, as opposed to, because whenever you use the marquee tool normally as a selection tool, it's going to drag from a corner, right? How do you draw from the center? Again, we go back to our other friend, the Option or the Alt key. If Shift will constrain the proportions of what we draw, the Option key gives us the option to draw it from the center. I'm going to try to nail the center of this piece here. It's not exact science, but let's say that's roughly the middle. If I hold down Option and now start dragging, I get a shape that drags from the middle, right? And you're saying, wait a minute, but gosh, I want a perfect circle. I don't want this blob shape. You can use both keys simultaneously. Boom, there's Shift. Hold down Shift and Option, and you will get a perfect circle that scales up from the center, or the center of its own shape there. And again, I didn't find the exact center of that shape on the artwork, but I kind of eyeballed it, but you get the idea. That's how you can draw a perfect circle out from the center. Or I do want the whole image, and I go back to my square selection tool. Rectangular marquee is the real name for it. And again, I can draw from the center out like so. Okay, and I'm going to cut off some of those pixels over there. So great. All right, so now we selected that, and if you are playing along at home, go ahead and select this image in whatever way you want to, whether you drag from the corner or you try to drag out from the center, holding down the Shift and the Option keys. I'm pretty sure this is a perfect square here, but I'm just going to double check. I'm going to Shift drag from the corner. Yeah, that looks like a perfect square. I'm going to cut off a few pixels on the outside just to make sure I get the image with no white. All right. So now I've got this selected. So I've been manipulating this so far by using the fill command just to fill with color as by way of example. I can also manipulate this selection by moving it or transforming it. Okay. How do I do that? That is the guy right up here, top of our tool palette, and probably the one you use the most is this guy. That's the Move tool. Okay. And that looks at the little crosshairs with the arrows going in both directions. Okay, that is the Move tool used to physically move things around, as opposed to the marquee. If I move the marquee, I'm not changing any of the artwork. I'll go back to that. See, I haven't affected anything. I'm just moving the marquee, right? No big deal. If I now use the Move tool, and notice that the Move tool, and normally it's this crosshairs with the cursor. If I move it over something that's selected, you see a little pair of scissors. What's going to happen when I move this with the tool is it's going to take what I've selected and physically change the artwork. So I'm clicking and I'm dragging. Boom. There we go. Notice my marching ants are still there. It's still selected. Okay. And now it is a separate piece of artwork that I can manipulate and float on top of everything. Now, this is all well and fine if I'm doing something very quick and dirty. And again, I'm using my space bar to go to my hand tool very quickly because I want to see my shadow box now. Where do we want this guy? Okay, I need to find a space for him. Maybe I'll put him up here. This is all well and fine, but if I deselect, okay, which again is Command D, or I'm going to use my marquee tool and deselect it. How do I get that back? Oh yeah, Move tool. I'll go back here. Oops, I'm grabbing everything. What happened? What happened? Well, I deselected, so I no longer have that piece selected. But by doing it this way on a single layer, and we're getting into the layers palette a little bit over here. By doing it this way, I'm only seeing one layer. All of this, think of it as a flat piece of artwork. I haven't taken this wood screw and moved it onto a new layer at all. I haven't made it a separate element. I was working on the exact same layer. The minute I let go, it kind of glued itself back down, and now all of this is one giant, one continuous piece of artwork again. I haven't made this a separate element that I can then move and manipulate at will. So that was a mistake. That was very, very bad, bad instructor. We don't want to do it that way. I showed you the wrong way to do it on purpose. So let's go back and do it the right way. So I'm going to hit undo and put it back. All right, that's where we were. I'm going to select it again. I want to make this a new layer. You notice over here in the layers palette, we have layer 0, okay, which is the bottom layer, because you actually start at 0 and then you can go up from there. This is a layered file, but I don't have any extra layers. Now I can make a new layer by going down here, and again, this is a slightly older version of Photoshop. There's going to be different buttons down here on the newer version, but you get the idea. I think the new one actually has a little plus sign down in here, but it's the same idea. If I click that, I get a new layer. It's now called layer 1 because I started at 0. If I keep clicking this, they're going to name themselves sequentially like so. Layer 1, layer 2, but they are empty. The little eyeball next to it will turn that layer on or off. I'll actually turn off the bottom layer, and you can see I have nothing there. This grid, by the way, if you see the white and the gray checkboxes, that means transparency. Or in the video world, that's alpha channel. There's nothing there, literally nothing there. There's no color whatsoever. That's the transparency grid, which means you have some see-through there on the artwork. Both, and I can see by looking closely at the artwork preview in the layers, again, I can see that those are empty. And if I turn the bottom layer back on, and if I turn those off, there's nothing there, so it doesn't do anything. So this bottom layer is still one giant layer. All these pieces are flat, okay? I want to take our good friend the wood screw here, and I want to make it a new layer. And wouldn't it be nice if there was just a quick and easy way to do that after I've made my selection? I'm just clicking and dragging. Yes, there is. If I right click on the selection, I get a flyout menu, and you can see I have some of the other options here. I had deselect, I had inverse, I had feather, right? Those are some shortcuts available to me if I right click using my mouse. And you can see down here, layer via copy, layer via cut, and new layer, okay? And actually that didn't do anything. We don't want to use new layer. We want to use one of the other options. We want to right click and go layer via cut. And that will, oops, sorry. That is a common error. That was, did that on purpose, haha, just to show you. I was working in a transparent layer, this here, there's nothing in it. I'm actually gonna get rid of those, and I can select them like this, holding down my shift key, and down at the bottom right, there's a garbage can, and the layers palette, boom, they're gone, get rid of them. Okay, so now we just have the one layer here. If you try to cut or copy anything out of a layer that is empty, it's gonna warn you and say, there's nothing there, I can't do anything. Okay, so now I'm gonna right click again, and on this layer, and I'm going to layer via cut, okay? And you'll notice now there is a new layer automatically named, and if I hide the layer below, that new layer now contains that shape. And if I turn that layer off, you'll notice the transparency there. I literally cut as if I was using scissors or a knife. I took that selection that I made and it cut it, and it made it its own layer. All right. So that's a quick and easy way to make that a new layer. And I showed you the option to cut it because I wanted to physically take it out of there. I can also copy it. If I don't want to destroy this layer again, let's work non-destructively. I just want a copy of this wood screw. I'm going to do layer via copy. It does the same thing, except that it is still visible on the bottom. I didn't cut it out with scissors. I made almost like a cloned copy of it on another layer. It's however you want to work with it. If you know for sure you don't need that second copy of it, you can use the cut command. And just like cutting, which by the way, this seemed to be okay, but I have noticed the layer via cut option sometimes creates a little thin area of transparent pixels. Almost as if, when you cut paper with scissors, it destroys it just slightly on the edges so that if you were to try to paste them back together again, you're actually missing a little bit of that paper. So layer via cut can be destructive within a 1 or 2 pixel margin around the edges. So if you're unsure which one to go with, layer via copy, non-destructive, no harm, no foul, and that way you're not messing with the original layer at all. So we did, again, I will go back, I'll undo. I have my image selected here. I use my zoom tool. By the way, I can also click and drag in the zoom tool like so. Very handy. Click and drag in here. Use my hand tool, get around. I have my marquee. I go back to that tool so I can right click and I go layer via copy. And there we go. And now I go to my move tool. And because I have layer 1 selected, and you can always tell it's a lighter version of gray. So I have layer 1 selected and I drag, look at that. Okay. If I let go and come back to that layer later, I'm still able to manipulate that shape. And now I can drag it up in here and drop it into this shadow box. Okay. Now notice it doesn't quite fit, right? I want this to fit, but man, it's just, the sizing is all off here. So how do I do that? How do I get this to fit? There is a tool to enlarge any layer, and you want to use this carefully. You don't want to blow things up too much because, again, as we showed earlier, a really, really small image enlarged way too much starts to fall apart, but you can do small adjustments. The command to transform this is Command T for transform. Okay, I'll hit escape, which takes that off. And that is under layer, or I believe it's under edit. See, again, I'm too used to my keyboard shortcuts here. Yeah, free transform, that's what it's called. Command T, and again, that's under the edit menu or Command T on the keyboard. And you'll notice the difference here. Instead of the marching ants, I actually have little boxes in the corners and in the center of each side. And I can use that to drag like so. If I drag from the corner, it gets bigger from the corner. If I drag from the middle, it does it that way. That is a way to, and again, I don't want to go nuts. I don't want to do this, okay? That's going to fall apart. Again, I can't add resolution back, but I'll hit undo. I can certainly go smaller. That's not going to affect it too much. I can go just a little bit bigger just to fill those empty pixels. Okay, so that's nice. And again, it is dragging from the corner. So gosh, wouldn't it be nice to drag a corner but have it scale from the center? In other words, the anchor point would be in the middle. If you recall what we did with the selection marquee tool, okay, the command for that was use the option key. Do we have the same option here? Yes, we do. Option, drag, will scale from the middle, from that middle anchor point, which is dictated by these crosshairs right here, okay? And that will scale it up. Now you'll notice by default, it is scaling automatically in proportion, okay? If you are used to an older version of Photoshop, you are probably used to seeing something like this. You would take a corner and drag it, but immediately it would become deformed and you would have to hold down the shift key because again, a shift does things proportionally. They gave you the option to basically destroy this image by accidentally changing the aspect ratio. I tend to be a purist with images. I can tell when things have been stretched and squeezed too much or even just a little bit. I know what this screw looks like, and if I see even this, that makes me nuts because I can tell that someone didn't carefully resize this thing. I hit my undo. And I think the good folks at Adobe finally had enough of this as well. And they said, let's give folks a helping hand and turn that feature off by default so that no matter what they do in the transform tool, it will be a proportional scale. If you don't like that, or you actually need to manipulate this in a non-proportional way, if you hold down the shift key, again, I know this is actually counterintuitive to the way I explained it earlier, but with this tool in particular, if you hold down the shift key, it actually goes back to a non-proportional transformation. But normally, it will scale proportionally no matter which of these boxes you drag it from. Again, the old versions of Photoshop did not work this way. It was the opposite. If you miss that, or your muscle memory is too ingrained, you're so used to holding down the shift key, and trust me, this took me months to get over. I love this now. And I love demoing this now because you can't make a mistake with these defaults. But believe me, I held down the shift key for a long time and wound up doing this. If you prefer the old way, that is in the preferences. And we haven't talked about the preferences yet. I'm going to deselect this. I'm going to go into preferences under Photoshop. And I believe it is where, okay, so right off the bat, in general, you can see here, use legacy free transform. If that is selected, and I go back to free transform, by default, it does this kind of non-proportional deforming transform. And if I hold down the shift key, that gives me the expected behavior. If you are just starting out in Photoshop or you're learning this again for the first time and you haven't touched it in a while, I highly recommend leaving that alone. It is usually off by default. You have to look for it. That way you can be assured that you will never accidentally deform the image by scaling it up and down too much. Okay, so I'm going to scale this up, and great, but now I've made it too big. Gosh, what am I going to do here? Well, I'm going to try to fit this into the corner of the box just a little bit. And there, oh, see what happened is that box is not a perfect square, and what we have is a perfect square. So what we need to do is make it a little bit larger than what we've got, and then we need to shave off the rest of the, I'm gonna double click, and by the way, double clicking commits, okay, if I go undo. I can do this all day with these little boxes here, and until I commit this transform, it's not gonna do anything. If I hit escape, it's gonna go back to the way it was. Escape key is sort of the deselect for the transform tool, okay, so I go Command T again, transform, again, that's back under here, edit free transform. Until I commit this change, nothing is going to happen. So by committing, I pull this out like this. There's two ways to commit that are very quick and easy. The first way is to double click, just like that, and see it committed to the change, made the change, the little boxes went away. I'm going to hit undo, go back and transform again. The other way is to use, I'm going to hold down my option key, I'm scaling from the center. The other way, if you have an extended keyboard, the other way is to hit the enter key on the bottom right below the number pad, and that will also commit the change. So we have an image, but it now is too darn big to fit in this box. So what are we going to do? Just like a good TV show, we will get to that after the break. I don't know about you. I need to get more water. I've been talking for a good solid 2 hours here. I kind of need to use the restroom, so I will be right back. I recommend everyone else take a quick break, get some liquids, use the bathroom if you need to. I'll be back in 2 minutes. am back. I'm going to stop the screen share just for a second and pump back into Zoom. Here we go. And hi, Michael. If you're there, welcome to the class. To my class participants, do you have any questions, anything we've covered so far? Michael, I know you jumped in a little late. If you want me to cover anything in particular that you kind of came in the middle of, I can give you a refresher in a little bit. Otherwise, for the rest of you, any questions on anything I just covered? And if you're still in the bathroom, that's totally fine. I should not be this out of breath from running up the stairs. Okay. Get this here. Sorry. I'm now sitting much, much lower. This is terrible. From Joe. All good? Okay, cool. Michael, I'll ask you this tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit more about what you want to learn from the class, or maybe at the end of the night we can do that as well, or make sure that you're getting what you need from this if you have specific things that you want to work on. And I like to offer that, especially when we have nice size classes like this that aren't full of hundreds of people. I can give a little more personal attention that way. So fantastic. Okay, great. So let's jump back in here. And Jessica, are you good? Make sure she's back in case she went to get water or something. I need to drink a little slower so I can serve my liquids here. I don't have to run to the bathroom again before the end of the class, hopefully. So much easier when I'm teaching at the facility because I can give you guys assignments and then run to the bathroom and get more water. Okay, I think Jessica may be away from keyboard here. We'll give her another minute here. Again, if you're just tuning in or you've been following along on YouTube, Facebook Live, however this is streaming out to the interwebs. Hi, everybody. Welcome or welcome back. Again, this is a quick Photoshop 101 intro lesson. This is session 1 of what is normally a 2 full day session of in-person learning. With the current crisis we switched everything to Zoom and broken it up into 4-hour chunks so that it actually takes 4 days, but only half a normal day. So this is basically night 1. And by the end of this course, normally everyone is not fully up to speed on Photoshop per se, because it is an incredibly deep program. There's a lot of things you can do with it. But I'd like to make sure every student has the basics and the foundations of how Photoshop works. So when you get started on a new project, you know the lay of the land, and you know the basics of how to use the simplest of tools and the basic tools, and to manipulate the program however you need to do it to get your work done. And if you are into more complex things, you want to learn more painting, more complex image manipulation, layering, compositing, and those are all possible within Photoshop. Anything is pretty much possible in here, but those are more advanced courses that we won't have to, or advanced topics we don't have time to get to. That's more in a Photoshop 201 or even a 301 class, where we really get into the nitty gritty of what this program can do. But by the end of this first course, the idea is, and even this first night, hopefully you're all gaining a little bit of something of familiarity with the software. So it's not so scary just to open it up and go, oh my God, what do I do first? We started with image sizing and resolution and all that kind of good stuff. And now we're working with the basic tools. And by the end of the class, again, I hope you feel very confident in using Photoshop on a daily basis, okay? All right, so we're gonna jump back in here, and hopefully Jessica will jump back in here with us here in a second. And everyone else who's following along at home, we're gonna go back to our awesome shadow box here and back to Photoshop. There we go. All right, so we're in here now. I'm gonna close my history palette. And my zoom menu is in the way, but hopefully I can get rid of that here in a second. I have, there it goes. Okay. So what we have here is to recap, we made a selection. We selected the square of this shape down here that has the screw in it, and we copied it or cloned it to a brand new layer, which appears over here in our layer palette. And because it is a new layer, can be manipulated completely independent of the other artwork. And as long as it's on a new layer, that will be true. And if we hide the other artwork, we can see, because of that transparency grid, that is the only thing that is on this layer. Okay, so that's great. And then we moved it over here and we sized it to try and fit it in the shadow box. And we discovered that this panel in here is not perfectly square, but that is what we have. We have a square selection. So now we got to figure out how to make this thing fit. All right. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. I'll just kind of show you one basic way of getting this thing in there, which is, we know we have to shave this thing down, right? Originally it was a little too small. We made it large, but now it doesn't quite fit in the square. Okay, so how are we going to do that? There's different ways to shave off the portions of this image. One of the things we can use our good friend, the marquee tool for, is to tell Photoshop what to get rid of. Okay, so by making a selection like this, and again, I'm only affecting this layer. I'm on layer 1, which is just this square. If I make this selection, I go under edit and I go clear, it's going to cut or delete whatever I just told it to select right here with my selection tool. I'm gonna hit undo. The other way to do that, by the way, and much, much quicker in my opinion, is just the delete key. Same thing. I'm really, really big again on keyboard shortcuts. Boom, delete key, that portion's gone. All right, I can do the same thing at the bottom here, try to get that, select, delete, going away. Well, now we're kind of running into the same problem we had before. Doesn't quite fit, but because this image is covering up the bottom, I don't know where to cut. I need a more exact guide on what I'm doing here. So this isn't really working. This isn't great. Let's undo, undo, undo. Or again, I could go back to my history palette over here, which for me is docked at the top. If you don't see it, go to Window, History, should come right up. I'm gonna go back to here. Okay, that's good. Close that guy. I don't know where to draw because it's covering it up. So it feels a little counterintuitive. So wouldn't it be nice to see the image below? There's different ways to do that. So I can actually turn this off. The nice thing about the selection tool is it's layer independent. It doesn't care what layer you're on. The layer that you're on is what is affected by the transform or the paint action, whatever you do to physically manipulate it. But you can draw a marquee on any layer. So let's draw a marquee on this. I'm going to turn that layer 1 off. Again, that is my square. And I'm using the marquee tool. I'm going to draw from the corner this time, and I'm going to try to isolate this box. So now I have that shape. There we go. Okay. And again, I didn't hold down the shift key because I know this is not a perfect square. So now I've drawn this box. That looks pretty good. That's pretty tight. So now I have my selection. Turn this layer back on. So again, I'm on layer 1. So if I do something now, it's going to affect layer 1. So I very easily turned off that layer just to make the selection on the visible layer, turn this layer back on, and now I could do something in here. So I would love to cut off the pieces that I don't need. Now, but if I hit delete now, that's not what I want. That just chopped out the middle. Again, what do we do in this scenario? I want everything outside of my selection. Right click, and we go to select inverse. And that is also, again, available up top here under select inverse, shift command I. That selects, and again, you can see the marching ants are now around the entire image. That just selected everything outside my square. If I use the delete key now, look at that. Boom, nice and clean. That fits right in there. Pretty nice. Okay, so we just got this sucker to fit inside of there. Now, another shortcut I will show you. That was an easy way to do it. Here's another way to do it, because there's always different ways to do things in Photoshop. There's never just one way. Here's what I had originally. I can't see the bottom image, so I don't know what to select. I can reduce the opacity of this square and let some of that bottom part show through. If I don't want to go through the step of turning this off and making the selection here, I still want to see the image. Up here in the layers palette, you see opacity. It's always set to 100 by default. I can drag that down. There we go. and you can see it's starting to fade. I'm changing the opacity of the layer. This is non-destructive. I can go right back to 100. Drop it to 0. Okay, that's a non-destructive action. As long as you have a layer, you can change the opacity at will, back and forth. You can also type. If I know I want this to be exactly 50, I just double-clicked here in the value area, and I typed 50 and hit enter, and that went to 50%. And now I have a pretty good view of this. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I can now see this image, and I can see the box it's supposed to sit in. And now I can do my command. I'm going to again drag from the corner and make it fit like so. Pretty close enough for government work. And then again, I'm going to select inverse, hit delete. I deselected, and I go back to that. There we go. Now I have something that more or less fits into that shadow box. Is it perfect? Could it use a little bit of drop shadow, a little flare, pizzazz? We'll get to that later, but for now, we're just trying to get these pieces docked in the correct portion of the shadow box. So that's a few different ways to use the marquee tool in concert with the selection tool to manipulate images. Again, whatever we select is moved by the transform tool, which is here. Whatever we select, it's done that way. Or you can use the selection on any image and then delete a portion of it by selecting and then hitting the delete key. Okay, so getting this guy up here, pretty simple. Okay, that was a square. That shape was more or less a square. It's just a bunch of straight lines. That's pretty straightforward. What do we do when we have a shape that isn't quite perfect? Okay, how are we going to get, say, for example, this thing over here? Let's take a look at this down on this bottom right. Not even sure, I'm not gonna lie, I don't even know what that is. It feels like a little piece of artwork someone made in their spare time. They found something on the beach. Might even be a plate with a couple of seashells on it. I'm not quite sure what that is. We could try to get this isolated with an ellipse. So for example, we can do this here. I'm using the ellipse tool, which makes anything a more circular shape. And again, I'm going to hold down the option because that draws from the middle, and I can try to get this more or less. That's not bad. It's not bad. And that's a little off. So again, I can just click and drag and move that in there like so. I kind of got it. The tricky thing with circular selections like this is it's hard to go back and add after the fact and keep a nice ellipse shape. I mean, I hold down the shift key and I can add to it, but chances are it's going to make the selection a little lumpy. You can see that it's got kind of this weird thing, and then I have to go in and try to get rid of that. They're very difficult to do. So let me show you another way to select or to isolate. Key tool is difficult in this case. I couldn't draw. This isn't a perfect circle, and it's not quite a perfect oval. I'm not sure where it's falling in here. I want to make sure I just grab the shape and not the white. So how do I do that? So I'm going to deselect here, and I don't have to be perfect right off the bat. I need to just get this first and foremost. Let's just get this on a new layer. And how do we do that? Again, let's just select it with a marquee tool. I'm just going to use the rectangle, quick and dirty. I'm going to just make it a larger selection that encompasses both the object and the background behind it. And then I right click and I go new layer via copy. And again, that clones it. I'm going to turn off the bottom layer of artwork, and I'll turn off that top wood screw. So now just layer 2 is visible, and I can just focus on that. Because again, this is a copy. If I start working on this, but this bottom layer is still active, I'll probably still see that artwork underneath it and I'll get confused. So let's just turn that layer off really quickly. Okay, and what I want to do is grab this, just the plate. I'm going to call it a plate, and not the white. Remember earlier, I said sometimes the quickest way to get what you want is to select the opposite and then do an invert. In other words, select the part that's easier to grab, and then you can grab everything else. What I mean by that is, what is the most common denominator on what we have here? What is the one uniform piece of this design? It's the white, right? What if we could just grab the white and then invert that selection so we're only grabbing the plate and not the white. Is there a quick and easy way just to grab the white? Obviously, I don't want to try and draw that with the marquee tool like I did before, and then using the other ellipse marquee, which you can do, holding down the option key to subtract, I can try to delete the plate, but again, that's not going so well. And I'm right back where I started trying to make that weird selection work. Let's not do that. Let's go something a lot simpler. Underneath these tools here, we are looking for the magic wand. It is usually the fourth one down, and it is also the W command. And that is the magic wand tool. It literally looks like a little magic wand. Yay. What the magic wand does is it will read the pixel value directly underneath it as you click, and it will then try to grab all the pixels of the exact same value around it. That's how the magic wand works. That is known as contiguous, and that is actually checked up here at the top. I don't know if you guys can see the zoom thing getting in the way. There's a checkbox up here that says contiguous. That means if you detect a pixel next to this pixel that has the exact same value, same color, just keep selecting it. So using the magic wand tool, just click the white and see what happens there. Look at that. It selected the white and it kept going, right? Because that white was uniform. There's no variations. There's no shadows. It just selected all the white. It read the value underneath that the tip of the magic wand and selected all of it. And if I'd done the same thing in the plate, but use the orange, go ahead and deselect that using Command D again, or just clicking. And then selecting here, look at what happens. See, it grabbed the orange and actually grabbed quite a bit of it. Okay. And why did it grab so much of it? That has to do with what is known up here as the tolerance. The higher the tolerance, the more colors close to that color it will select. The lower the tolerance, very little. Go ahead and set that tolerance to 5 if it isn't already. I'm going to deselect. I'm going to select that orange again. Look at that. Very, very small portion of it. It doesn't have a lot of tolerance for colors that aren't very close to the one that I selected. So if you're not getting any joy here, you want to set that tolerance a little higher. That was at 30, which was actually pretty nice. And you get that. Okay, so that's if I'm going in here and trying to select this orange, for example, or maybe I just want this yellow or that yellow, for example. Again, it is reading the pixel value underneath the tip of the magic wand. And based on what the tolerance is, it will grab any colors that are within that limit. If the tolerance is set super high, it will grab a lot, okay? In this case, with white, if it's uniform, there's no shadows, there's no variations of white, there's no gray in here, the tolerance kind of doesn't matter. That's a nice solid selection right there. So again, I've selected the white. I don't want the white, I want to get rid of it. I could select I could do an invert, right? So with the marquee tool selected, I can, oops, sorry, I'm on the magic wand still, there we go. I can select the inverse, and now I just have the plate. But notice it's grabbing a little bit of stuff here on the outside. I don't want that. I'm going to hit undo. I just want the white selected. And again, I can hit the delete key, and now the white is gone. Okay. So again, going back, quick recap. We had the white. We used the magic wand tool. We clicked the white because it's uniform. It grabbed all of it. And I can now hit delete. And now I have that shape. Fantastic. It is on its own layer. I'm going to turn the bottom layer back on, and let's put that where we think it belongs. So let's go like this, and again, I'm using spacebar, hand tool. I think that goes in B. Let's give it a shot. Look at that. Perfect. Boom. Fits right into that shadow box. Okay. So that's one way to get the shape that we want. But okay, let's go with a hard one here. We're going to leave that guy for a second here. So down here at the bottom, I want to show a different way to select something. So we could do the same thing here if we wanted to. We could try to select this guy. And again, I want to put that on its own layer. That's actually pretty easy. I can just grab, whoops, I don't want that ellipse. I want the rectangle. But again, I can just grab that shape, right click, layer via copy. And there, by the way, when you start getting multiple layers and you want to turn a bunch of them off, it gets pretty laborious because now I got to do this and this and this, so forth. There is I just hit undo. I'm going to make a new layer again, layer via copy. Okay, so with all the layers turned on, there is a shortcut to actually isolate just the layer that you want to see. Rather than go through and turn off all these eyeballs, I can hold down the option key. Haha, again, our friend the option, can do multiple things. In this case, Option eyeball keeps that layer on, automatically turns off the other layers. If I do that again, turns them all back on. Again, that is the Option key. Click on the layer that you want to see, and it's if you know your video terminology, I just soloed that layer so it is by itself. And now I can manipulate this seashell, or is that a mussel? I think that's a mussel. We can do the same thing. Let's see how the magic wand does here. I've got that selected. I got a magic wand tool, and oh, that's pretty good. It got most of the blue again because my tolerance was nice and high. If I'd set that tolerance to something like 5, I probably would have just gotten little portions of the blue, right? Now, one thing you can do if you are not getting continuous, it's not selecting all the pixels. Again, you hold down the Shift key and look at that. There's our friend, the plus sign, works on a lot of different tools. In this case, I'm adding to the selection. Instead of selecting something new, I just keep punching this guy until, whoops, that was a mistake. I get what I want. And now I think I've selected all that blue. Hit delete. And there we go. There's a little blue left. It didn't quite do a perfect job there. By the way, if you keep hitting delete, sometimes it gives you just a little more, shaves off a little bit of extra blue right there. Okay, so now we've got that shape. Let's turn our artwork back on and move him into position like so. And aha, okay, we've got an issue here. Actually, there's a couple of issues. Let's deal with this one first. It's obviously in the wrong orientation. Okay, so how do we spin this or rotate it to get it to where it needs to go? Let's go back to our friend, the transform tool, and we're going to free transform. And again, that is under file, edit, free transform. Again, I am used to my keyboard shortcuts, so I just go Command T, and that gives me the bounding box with these little squares in all the corners in the middle of the sides. Now, this is normally we've used this for scaling. For example, we're not going to scale this. We need to rotate it. There is a rotate command, but there is a shortcut for it. If you move your cursor just outside the box, notice the arrows. It goes from this double-sided arrow to a double-sided arrow with a corner bend to it. That is a shortcut to rotate. So if you see that, you just have to go a little outside the tool. It turns to this. And now if you click and drag, you rotate. And notice it is rotating around the center axis, or that axis point where the crosshairs are. So I can now rotate this. Do I want to rotate this a perfect 90 degrees? Yeah, that would be nice. Right now it's kind of free rotating. I want to constrain it to specific angles. Aha, constrain. That should be a key word. How do we constrain? Earlier, we held down the Shift key, and now it's going at, looks like 15-degree increments, and boom, it's 90. And it kind of sticks. It's not quite as free transform. It's a little harder to rotate, and that makes sure that I get a perfect 90-degree angle. But let's say I want to be really precise. I'll go back, I'll hit undo. I have that selected. Notice up here, we've been kind of ignoring our options panel while we're doing this. We can type in all the values we want. I can actually change the scale right here. I don't have to drag anything. I want to make this 200%, 100% larger than it is. I type in 200. Right? And it's proportional because that's what this little chain means. The width and the height are linked together. I just blew that up to 200%. Okay, I'm gonna hit undo. Or I can rotate. See, I have a rotate value here. I can just type in 90 degrees, and there we go. And I hit my enter key to commit the change. There we go. Had to hit it twice. Go back to my move tool and now put my friend into position. Okay, so again, 2 different ways to rotate if that's what you're trying to do. This is the original. Command T brings up the transform controls, the free transform bounding box. And I can either drag by moving the mouse just outside the image and spinning like so. And if I hold down the Shift key, it will give me a perfect 90 degrees. Or I hit undo. I can actually type in 90 degrees. If I know the angle, if I know this is perfectly straight and typing 90 will turn it 90, there we go. And then hit enter, and we're good to go. And now I can use the tool to move it back into shape. Now, there were 2 errors I mentioned. One, we just fixed, right? It was at the wrong orientation, right? So how do we get in there? We rotated it. But notice this, I'm gonna zoom in a lot. See this? This is bad, Okay, I made a mistake. The way I selected it with the magic wand, I didn't use enough tolerance. This is the byproduct of that. When I went to delete that extra blue, which again, I'll zoom back out. When I originally selected this, I didn't get all of it, right? I didn't eliminate this blue. I accidentally got just a little sliver of it here. Ugh. Now, if you're zoomed way out, you can't see it, but if I'm zoomed way in, I want to print this out, frame it, put it on my wall. I don't want anyone who comes to my house to look at that and go, good God, who selected that muscle? They did a horrible job. So how do we get rid of those extra pixels? A couple different ways we can do it. We haven't gotten into the brush tools a whole lot, but the opposite of our brush tool, because again, a lot of tools in Photoshop have an exact opposite. The opposite of creating a color or shape with a brush tool is to erase it. And there is actually an eraser tool, which is down here. Then of course, E is a quick, easy shortcut to remember. So that's the eraser tool. You don't want the other two, background or magic. You just want the standard eraser tool. And I've got a really large eraser. If I move over this dark area here, I can see the size of my eraser tool. That's pretty massive. I don't need it to be that big. I'll explain how all this works here later, but let's just bring that size down. I will talk about that palette in due time. Don't worry. I can go in and kind of erase. But this isn't exact, and my eraser is too soft. And see, I'm actually screwing up the muscle there. I got into the artwork, and ugh, that's a mess. I need to do this a lot quicker, easier. I don't want to spend all my time shaving off all these little pixels. I want to make this a much quicker process because, again, time is money, and I need to cover up this mistake as quickly as possible before the boss comes back and looks over my shoulder. So what do? I need to reselect this muscle. Okay, so I'm going to go here, and I want to just grab the muscle again. So how do we do this? Well, shoot, I just want the outline of the muscle, but I don't have that selection anymore. I kind of let that go. If I start over with my marquee tools, I'm kind of back to square one. I have to figure out how to draw this shape, and that's kind of a nightmare. I could go back to my magic wand, but that's not going to be perfect. And based on my tolerance, I could grab the wrong stuff, and I could inadvertently wind up grabbing those little blue pixels along the edges here. This is going to take all day for me to make sure I select everything. Gosh, wouldn't it be nice, because this is on a layer by itself, I will turn off the bottom layer again. Wouldn't it be nice if because it's on a layer by itself, I can ask Photoshop, will you please kindly just select the object on the layer, and don't make me go through the laborious process of trying to figure out where the boundaries of that object are using the marquee tools, because that will take me all day. And the answer is, of course, yes, there's always a shortcut for anything. If you hold down the Command key and mouse over where it says layer, notice it changes to a little hand and a marquee box. And that is asking Photoshop, hey, will you grab the pixels on this layer? And it's a nice clean layer. There's not a whole lot here. It's just the muscle. So it's going to ignore the parts of the layer that are transparent, which is this whole checkerboard here, and just grab things that are actual pixels. So I do this and click. Again, I'm going to unselect. I'm on the marquee tool, and I go over here on the layer, and I hold down the Command key, and I click on layer 3. And I now have a perfect selection of all the pixels that were part of this muscle. Okay, I can see all of that. That's great. I grabbed everything. And I need to kind of shave off the outside. Some portions are okay, but we're kind of working quickly here. I just want to make a quick general move here and shave off all of the outside. So I'm going to right click, and I'm going to, actually, no, this is under selection. Sorry, so under select, again, modify. I want to contract. And I don't need 20 pixels. Let's go 5. Let's see. Oh, wow, that was a lot. Once you zoom, this is where the resolution of the image in terms of the pixel size that you made it really comes into play. You don't think 5 pixels is a lot, but when you're zoomed in this far, 5 pixels is like a mile, right? So we need to be a little more judicious in this and not as large. So let's go back to modify and contract, and let's make that 1. And I can already see that this has just, by the smallest margin possible, has just shrunk the selection by just enough to shave off 1 pixel around the whole outer edge. So I'm going to select the inverse because again, I have the muscle selected now. I want to select everything but the muscle, which is the inverse. And now I want to hit the delete key. And now all that stuff went away. Now it made the edges here really crappy looking. What happened there? Well, when you get in this tight on an image, and right now we're kind of low res because we're very, very close up on this. This was not a very high res image to begin with. It's only an 8 megabyte file here. Very much, it's not very big. So anytime you make a selection like that, it's going to get jagged, all right, because I don't have a lot of resolution to play with here. So I can do this, I can go back under modify, and I can go smooth. Let's just smooth this out. Let's go by 3. And that's going to give me a slightly smoother edge when I go back here and I go to select inverse. And oops, I was already on the inverse. Sometimes it's hard to tell when you're in that close. So I'm here. Okay, so now I have everything but the muscle selected. And now when I hit delete, ugh, that's still pretty nasty. I need to smooth it more. Let's go back under select, modify, smooth it again. Go another, let's go 5. And now when let's give that a shot. And a little better. Let's zoom back out. Okay, once we get back out here, that's not so bad. No one at my house is going to look that closely at this portrait. And again, this is all by way of very quick example. In a real world, we'd actually use a different tool, and I will be showing you that in a little bit. But just for quick and dirty, again, close enough for government work type stuff, what we just did seems to be okay. I've now shaved off all those horrible extra blue pixels, and I can't see them. And that looks pretty good, at least until I get that close, but no one needs to get that close. So, okay, so now we're there. So great. So we're filling in our shadow box. This is all working great. We've done our wood screw. We've done the muscle. We've done this weird seashell plate and put all that in position. I'll turn these other layers back on. We're filling our shadow box. So, okay, so what are we gonna do down here? We've got this piece of coral, okay? Yikes. We don't wanna go through and have to outline all of this stuff. But let's say we wanted to try, all right? Let's give it the old college try. What are we gonna do here? We wanna go, and there's a lot of, the good thing is there's actually a lot of straight lines in here. There's some curves, but there's a lot of straight kind of jagged edges. If we wanted to do this the hard way, you can draw using a form of the selection tool that is not a continuous circle or a continuous square. And that is our good friend down here. We're just kind of working on all just the basic selection tools this first night because there's so many and I want to show them all to you. The third one down is this friend right here. It is known as the lasso, okay? And the basic tool at the top here is literally looks like a lasso if you were out lassoing some cattle. What that allows you to do is to draw your selection completely freehand. I'm just holding the button down and I can draw any shape I want. And when I let go, this point here that it ends will automatically connect to the beginning. Like so, I'm going to draw another weird petal shape. And then when I let go, watch what happens. The shape where I ended will automatically connect to where I started. And that is this crazy new shape that I have made. Okay. I'm going to Command D, deselect. And again, just draw freehand when I let go. And you can get super fancy with this if you want, or you can just kind of draw very rough shapes. Like so, if you kind of go crazy and you start winding in on yourself, you're going to get some pretty wild selections here. Like so, it's going to just kind of go crazy. So you want to use this very sparingly. But I'm drawing this freehand. I actually want straight lines. Is there a way to lock it to a straight line? Absolutely. The other option under lasso here, I'm going to click it again. That's a flyout menu, and I have other tools. There is the polygonal lasso tool. What does that mean? That tool, I'm going to zoom in here. If I want to do this the hard way, which we're not going to do, but just by way of example, if I click, notice that I have a perfect straight line that connects from A to B. And we're going to work our way up this image like a good mountain climber does. You get to a certain point and the rocks change. And so you drop an anchor. So I click, I've now dropped an anchor and now I have a new point A and I will draw a new line between that and the new point B. If I click, that point B becomes the new point A and so on and so forth. I just keep clicking to draw around this shape. And again, I said we're not going to do this, but as far as this example image goes, I wanted to show you this tool. Again, this could be very, very laborious, not great. If I double click, whoops, I kind of did that badly. if I double click, it will complete the shape. So I'll just kind of draw very quickly like so. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Double click to finish it. It connects the last point to the first point, and now I have this shape here that I just drew. But that wasn't the whole piece of coral, and that's going to take me all night if I need to go up here, like so on and so forth. What that is nice for, I'm going to hit go back out to my image, Command 0, and go in here. What that is nice for is if I want to very quickly, I can see these corners, but I don't want to have to try to draw. Let's say I want to delete this sailing ship completely. Okay. Which let's go ahead and do that. So I could draw like this and try to eyeball it, but maybe that's not a traditional shape, or maybe one of those lines is not straight up and down. It's a little wonky. It's not a perfect corner. So I'm going to hit Command D on deselect. I'm going to use that polygonal lasso tool, and I can quickly draw a box of my own design. It does not have to have perfectly symmetrical sides that are parallel to each other. And I just click in each corner like so. And I can go back and I can actually close it. I don't have to double click. I can close the shape. You notice when I move the end point over the beginning point, there's a little circle there next to the tool. I click let go. That is my new selection. So that again, as the polygonal lasso tool, allows you to draw straight lines. And now when I'm on that shape, I can hit delete and sailing ship is gone. Okay, zooming back out like so. So there are cases, not particularly on this image, but there are cases where that polygonal lasso tool might come in handy like that. Again, let's go back to our friend the coral. This is a little difficult. I could try the final lasso tool here, which is magnetic, and this guy can be a lot of fun or it can be painful. The magnetic tool tries to read the pixels and automatically draw the lines for you, and all you have to do is drag. So I'm going to start down here, and I click once, and I'm just going to try to follow the outline. And you see sometimes it won't stick, so I click and it actually makes an anchor point, but it's trying its best to follow the contours. I'm not doing any of this here. I'm just clicking where I want it to set an anchor point, and it is actually following to some degree the pixels. Okay. Now this is not perfect. It's not exact, and I can tell when I zoom in here, I'm going to pull in some of that white. I don't want that either. So let's just not do that. Okay. Deselect that. I think in this case, what's going to work with our friend the coral is to again select the white and deselect everything else. So we're just going to go back to our normal marquee tool. We're going to select it, and we're going to make layer via copy. I'm going to isolate it again, Option key, eyeball. I just see that. I'm going to use the magic wand. My tolerance is set nice and high. I'm going to click the white. That looks pretty good. It even kind of cut into the coral a little bit, which I don't mind, but if you don't want to lose that much of it, maybe try lowering the tolerance just slightly. So I'm going down to 20. Won't kind of shave off quite as much of the coral, but I don't mind that because I can tell by cutting into it by just a pixel, which I don't think anyone will notice, it's going to make sure there's no white in that selection. And I hit delete, and yep, sure enough, that looks really nice and pretty, and got some decent soft edges there. I'm going to zoom back out, and I'm going to use again the transform tool, the move tool, hit the top, and put that in place. That obviously goes up here. I'll zoom in and drop it into place. And again, zooming, I'm just holding down the Option key and going back and forth with my middle scroll wheel on my mouse. If you don't have one of those, or you're on a trackpad, you can use the Command key and plus or minus on the keyboard, or your friend the zoom tool down here. Okay. All right, getting there. So we've got almost the whole box full. Let's see how we're doing. Great. We have one more shape to put in here, and that's this guy. All right. That is something. That's a nice. That's not a perfect circle. So again, with the marquee tool, that's going to be a little difficult to select, and even with the magic wand, that's going to be hard. Let's go ahead and put him on his own layer just to be safe. So we know we have to do that anyway. Again, marquee tool, very quick. I don't want this whole background, so I'm going to cut into it like so. Right click, layer via copy. That's now over here. And I'm going to hide the layers, Option, eyeball, boom, just this. So how do I isolate this shape? Even if I use the magic wand tool to try and isolate some of these colors again, and I'm not getting a whole lot of joy here. Not so great. I have to keep pulling down the shift key. I can go the opposite way. I can try to select the background. Yeah, see, there's two different shades of green here. If this was just white, that would be easy, right? We could just select the white with the magic wand tool. It's not working. So we need a different solution. Aha, let's try the lasso tool. Well, that's not going to work so well either, nor is the polygonal lasso tool, because there's no straight lines in this beautiful golden spiral of a seashell. That's not going to work. And our friend the magnetic lasso is unreliable at best and may not get us all the way there. See, he's already out of the gate. He's selecting some green by accident. He may get us there. Nope, don't like it. See, he's grabbing too much of the green and it's total chaos. All right, so let's skip that. No good. All right, how are we going to do this? So this is a tool. We may need to spend more time with it down the road, but I want to demo it tonight. It is down here at the bottom, near the bottom. It is the pen tool, okay? And that, of course, is P. And we're just going to use the top one here, pen tool. Okay. If you are unfamiliar with the pen tool, I urge you to get familiar with the pen tool. Why? It is in a good chunk of the Adobe applications, and even applications from other vendors use a variation of the pen tool. You will find this tool in Illustrator. You will find it in Premiere. You will definitely find it in After Effects. You use it for drawing shapes freehand. The difference between the pen tool and the other selection tools that are on here is that the pen tool will create a vector shape that you can manipulate after the fact, and you don't have to worry about the fact that, oh my God, I hit deselect an hour ago and I can't get back to that shape again, or I made a mistake and I drew outside the lines and now I have to go back and redraw the shape again. With vector, you don't have to. Vector that's one of the cool things about vector. Again, it's just a computer drawing lines. It's all math. Can you tell the computer to change the line after the fact? Absolutely. And when it's non-destructive, we're not affecting any of the image by drawing on top of it with this tool. So how do we use it? If you're unfamiliar with it, let's just get into Pen Tool 101 right now. It's Friday night. Why not? Let's go nuts. Okay, so we're here. I'm going to zoom way in. I like to see this demarcation line here. Using the pen tool, again, just clicking P. I set my first point. Okay. And right off the bat, there's two little lines here. There's two little circles. Those are handles. And by setting that, it's going to dictate where the second point is placed, like so. Okay, I just placed the second point. Now, that was a straight line. If I just click very quickly, it won't have those handles. That'll just be a solid, sorry, not a solid, a straight line between 2 points, which I actually don't want. This shape is all curve. There's no straight lines at all here. There's parts that look like they run straight, but that's not actually true. So I'm going to hit undo and get rid of all these pen things here. New work path. There we go. What I'm doing is creating what's called a path, and I'll show you that in a second. I'm going to click again, and this time I'm going to click and hold. I'm going to drag before I let go, and look at those two handles right there. What is that telling me? That the handles show the way that this is going to curve. So just before you let go, just spin your mouse a little bit and get used to the feel of what it is showing you. If I move back towards the middle, the curve in the line shrinks. If I drag out further, it's going to be a more extreme curve. And what the handles are doing are kind of aiming points. All right. This is where if I go like this, I can see that the top handle there is telling me where I was. The bottom handle is telling me where I am going, right? And if I can pull out or in. So this is going to take some practice. It's not something you learn overnight. You need to practice with the pen tool, but you will get used to the way that this works. If you're following along with me, let's do your best. You don't have to have a perfect shape. If you're struggling with the pen tool and you want to abandon the seashell, that's totally fine with me. And you can use a different tool to try and remove it from its background. I wanted to show you the pen tool right off the bat, and we'll come back to it. But this is a very powerful tool, and is actually my go-to because I love using this tool for non-common shapes, things that are not just perfect circles and squares, where the marquee tool is very, very simple to use to isolate things. In this case, I have to draw this shape. So I click and drag, and this line is still active. This path is not closed yet. I'm still working on this path. So I just select, so I click another shape, and here again, I drag, and what I can do is kind of shape the line here. See, I'm making sure that the path is kind of following the curve of the seashell. And I kind of know from experience where to place these points. I mean, you can do a bunch. You can go click, 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 click. You don't need that many with this shape. If you can find a way to do it with the least number of points, that's usually the easiest method. So I know, for example, usually on a curve like this, and I do this around fingers, this actually looks like the fingertip of maybe a fat thumb right now. I have to outline a lot of fingers usually when I'm chopping people out of backgrounds. I'm used to this kind of shape. It's usually a 1, 2, or a 1, 2, 3. So here, kind of right before it bends is one point, and then right in the center of this big bend here, before we go around it, we want to have another one like so. And again, I'm just kind of pulling until that line follows the curve down here. And then I need another point somewhere over here. Usually around here is a good spot. There's kind of a weird little bend here. I'll make sure I get that. So I'm going to go here. Okay. And again, that was 1, 2, 3. I could have put a point here and here, but I just knew I didn't need it because I know how this tool kind of bends and shapes. So you just want to kind of find the point where it starts to bend in a new direction and just place a point there. And again, I click and drag like so. Okay. And if you go off the reservation, you actually click over here. Don't worry about it. Just hit undo and it'll go away. It goes back to where it was. And I'm going to click here. All right. If you're struggling with this, don't worry. We'll cover this again later in this weekend. If you just want to watch me work right now, that's totally fine. But if you're buzzing right along with me, that's fantastic. And so let's go here and right there. That's a good spot. See how it just connects the lines, and then it starts to draw the path that I want. And we're getting close to the end here. We're going back, we're getting close to where we started. I need a point there. I need a point here. Now, this seems like it's taking a long time. I'm going slow for you guys. I probably could have drawn this in a quarter of the time. Again, I'm used to this tool. I can just go bang, 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 like so. Here we are, getting close to the end. I actually want to do a point here because I'm going to do a hard connection here. I don't want handles. I'm just going to click once without dragging, and that will create a hard corner right here. That's the only hard corner in the entire shape where these two lines come together. And that's my path. Okay, it's connected. I know it's connected because now all the little points have turned blue. And you'll notice if I hover over any of the points with the pen tool, it changes to minus, which means if I actually click on this now, it will remove that point. And in that case, it was actually nice. That wasn't really necessary. And if I hold down the command key, the pen tool changes to a pointer arrow. This is different than the normal transform arrow. This is one specifically for the pen tool, and it allows me to manipulate, in this case, the handle, which I can now drag like so. Okay, so I'm manipulating it that way. All right, and I can go back. So, and again, this is vector. This path is here. I don't have to worry about losing this path by clicking off of it or deselecting it. This is a vector path that will stay part of this image until I delete it, which is nice. That's one of the nice, cool things about the pen tool and paths in general. They stay. All right. So and then I can go back, and because it is vector, I can go back and physically change things after the fact in a way I could not do with the marquee tool. I see a point here. I have a little bit too much of the green background. I need to pull this in. I can add a point. If there's no point here, if I click on a point, it deletes it. If I click on a section of the path where there is no point, it will add an anchor, and I can move that in. And again, I hold down the command key to get that arrow, and I can drag that point in so that it's cutting off that portion of the image, and I don't need to see that green. There we go. That looks good. That looks good. That looks good. And again, I'm eyeballing this. We're moving kind of quickly. That looks nice and solid. And what I want to do now is actually save this path. Okay, I could use a little touch up right there. Pardon me. There we go. Much better. Don't want my pen instructor to see that. Okay, so I have this great path, and I actually want to save it in case I want to come back to this later. What do I do in this case? You'll notice here, if you don't see it next to layers, you go to window and choose paths. In this case, I have it here. It's just docked behind it. If I click paths, there we go. You'll notice I have what's called a work path. Okay, that's this guy right here. And that is what I just drew. And notice, so if I click off of it, it goes away, but it's still there. Again, that's the nice part of a vector path. I have it. Okay. And for some reason, there's another path in here. I think there was something else that I drew. I'm going to click on it. I can delete that other path I don't need. I'll use the garbage. Delete path 1. Are you sure? Yes. Work paths are somewhat temporary. They will go away. If you want to make sure that this is a permanent part of the application, you can double click, excuse me, on the path, and it asks me save. And again, I just double clicked where it says work path, path 1. And I could name this whatever I want, so it's a little more descriptive. I'm going to call this the golden ratio seashell. Okay. I'm not sure if that's the golden ratio, but that's a catchy name, so we'll call it that. There we go. That is now saved. And if I were to close this program and reopen it later, that path would still be there, and I could just go into this palette and click on it, and boom, there it is. And this is a nice thing to have because I've taken all this laborious time to outline the shape. It'd be nice to go back if I need to fix it later. I've got this path I can manipulate. I go back to the pen tool and click on the path. I hold down the command key. I get the arrow. I click on the path. There it is. All my points are active. I can go back in, and again, I can still go back and change it after the fact, and it automatically saves the changes to that path in the palette. Very, very nice. So what can I do with this path? So down here in the paths palette, I have options of what to do with this thing. So I click on it, and then the third one over from the left looks like there's our friend, the marching ants. That is turn this path into a selection. Okay, so I'll show you that to you again. I click, make sure I have the path selected. I can see a little blue line. And this guy right here is turn path into a selection. There's my marching ants. And again, that icon looked exactly like that. There's other things we can do with paths. We'll talk about that later. But now I have that selection based on that freehand drawing path that I made. And I can go back and do things like select inverse and hit the delete key. And now look at that. Gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Zoom back out, go back to my layers palette, turn the bottom artwork back on, and pull back here and put him in place. That is E right there. Perfect. All right, turn the other guys back on. Here we go. Shadow box is almost full. What do we want to do next? We deleted that sailing ship earlier, and we actually have an extra image here. We have that sand dollar. I want to put the sand dollar into that box back there and fill it up. So how do I do that? So first of all, we do need it to be its own layer, right? And in this case, I actually want the red background for what we're about to do. So that's fine. So I need to select that. So I go on layer 0. If I actually just try to select something right now, I'm on layer 5, and that's wrong, and nothing's going to happen. So if I go, because I go dis, new layer, copy, see, cannot make the selection. It was empty. This happens to me a lot. I'm working fast. I forget what layer I had selected. I was on a different layer. I deselect, and now I go back to my base, layer 0, and now I can select this. And again, I'm just using the standard marquee tool set for rectangular shapes. And I go right click, layer via copy. All right, so now we've got him. He is now layer 6, okay? And let's zoom out a little bit. So I need to put him into this box. I just drag, and again, I'm just using the move tool, top right here. I'm gonna drag over here. Now, we could go through all the rigmarole we did with our wood screw here earlier and, you know, size him up to fit and shave off the edges and go through all that stuff. But we don't have to do that. Why? We actually have that hole already cut. I'm going to hide that sand dollar real quick. I'm just going to click on the eyeball. It goes away. We have that hole here. We have this nice hole we cut out. We got rid of that sailing ship that was in there. And we have this kind of window. It's all transparent back here. That's kind of like the window in the shadow box. We just need to put the artwork behind this box so that it shows through that transparent area. But the artwork, because it's on top, will be the new bounding box, and we don't have to worry about shaving that image to make it fit. So how do we do that? Because everything is in layers, I'm turning back on. We can drag layers to any order we want. The order is not set. So for example, if I take the layer 0, which is my base artwork, and I just click and drag like this, and see the little blue line, okay? And wherever I drop that, that's where it's going to go. I can drag that to the top. Okay, the numbers at this point don't mean anything. They're not that's not a strict order. They can be moved. And see that? I just dragged it on top of all of my artwork that I placed so meticulously for the last 3 hours, and I just ruined everything. So that's not what I want to do. I'm going to put that guy back at the bottom where he was. I want this sand dollar to be underneath or below layer 0. John, you can't go below 0. Yeah, you can. It's just a name. It doesn't mean anything. So I grab that sand dollar, which is layer 6, and I click and drag below layer 0. And now it is behind. See that? Because we cut that box, it is now framed by this artwork. And so now that it's here, I just need to fill this space. So again, I go Command T or free transform under edit, like so, right there. That was the option. So Command T, I get my little corner squares here, and I hold down the Option key to scale from the center, and I'm blowing this up a little bit. And again, enlarging a little bit from time to time, like this, by about 20–30% is generally okay, unless you have a very low res image. If you have a high res image, you can do a lot more with it. This type of enlargement is generally okay. If I was to make this thing massive, it would fall apart. We don't have the resolution for it, but just this little manipulation is fine. Okay, that looks good. I filled in all the empty areas. And again, all I have to do is just get this image to fill the frame to go a little outside of it. And I've got a perfect placement. I hit the Enter key, and I can still, by using my move tool on that layer, I can just move him around. See that? It's almost like that layer became a mask for this guy, and I could do something kind of asymmetrical and funky like that. And here we are. Okay, I'm gonna go, the last thing I'm gonna do here is hit save, because I don't think I've done that for 3 hours, and that is a big no-no. So I'm gonna hit Command S and save my work. And I'm going to stop sharing very briefly and jump back out here. And hi, everybody. Okay, so are there any questions from the class on anything we've just covered? And we'll go in and we'll finish up this image here very briefly, but I want to hear from you. Do you have anything specific about things we just did? Don't be shy. And you can also use the raise your hand tool in here. I believe, I don't know if you see that or not, if we turn that off or not. That actually allows you to use your microphone, I think, to ask a question. But if you're just more comfortable in the chat, that's totally fine too. Oh, that's terrible. You can't see me at all. Okay, I just can't sit down doing this. Totally fine. It's what I get for having a standing desk. Have to be standing. Any questions? I'll give you guys a few seconds here. If not, we'll move on. Oh, is there a hand up? Wait a minute. What do I do here? Q&A, Q&A, Q&A. Wait a minute. I see a hand. Oh, wait. Okay. Okay, I see the hand up. Sorry, guys. I'm not hearing. I don't think I can turn you on here. Let me see if I can do anything. Okay, Michael, I see your hand. I can't turn you on. Sorry about that. I thought I could do that. Go ahead and type the question in chat, if you will, and I will answer it for everybody. Sorry, I think it's still Zoom is still a work in progress here, so we're trying to work out all the bugs. There you go. Okay, fantastic. Are all versions pretty much the same? Is the question from Michael. The answer is charitably yes and no. I would say what we just covered is the exact same way that all of these tools would have worked 5 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. They've added to them a little bit since then. Tonight is kind of again, because it's 101, these are building blocks. Those tools, the way that we just did that and that functionality, that's been in there pretty much since Jump. The thing that was different that they added back in the 90s was layers. That was the last big thing that the innovation that would have changed. That was version 3, I think, which tells you how old I am. But basically anything in the last, certainly in the last 5 years, the last 5 versions of Photoshop, anything we just did is the same. What has changed there's some small things, like, for example, when I told you about the the way that drawing shapes now is automatically proportional, or that transforming is automatically proportional. That is a new addition to the last, I believe that started in 2019. I believe that was not in the 2018 version. And so little tweaks like that are different. And obviously they've done a lot under the hood every year to try and improve the code and try to make it work better on newer machines, newer CPUs. But there are some really large changes that they've done. They've added some new tools, things like content aware fill, which we will get to, which is pretty amazing. And those larger tools are the things that they've added every year. And some of those have been game changers, generally about image repair, image manipulation, different ways to clone, different ways to remove objects, remove people from stills and things like that. Those are the big additions. And a lot of that is tied to improvements with artificial intelligence. There's actually an AI engine called Adobe Sensei that they've developed over the last few years and given it more power. And it is able to do things like recognize faces. It's able to do things like recognize when an object is not the same as the background, and the object can be removed. And it can also repair the background where the object was. That's all possible due to Adobe Sensei. We'll get into some of that later this weekend. It's pretty amazing. It's a pretty cool tool set. So those are the things that changed. Usually those are the bigger leaps between versions. And every time they make a new version, they usually try to add something like that. That's kind of like a big wow moment to make that. Any other questions? Okay, good. Thank you, Michael. Anything else before we jump back in? Give you guys a couple of seconds here. And again, I'm sorry, the microphone thing's not working for you to ask, but we'll just work with chat for now, and I'll figure that all out tomorrow. Okay, I think we're good for now. So all right, we'll jump back in and we'll finish up. We'll do a final ask for questions here at the end, but for now we're going to jump back in, and let's go back in and share screen, go back to our project. Where are we? There we go. Okay, we're back in here in Photoshop. And again, I hit save. Hope you hit saved as well, and save our artwork. And so now we've got a pretty nice image here. And what we want to do is just shave it down to the shadow box. We have the original seashells. We kept everything because we used layer copies. And that was great because in case we screwed something up, we still had the original back down here in case I, for example, I'm going to go here and click on the seashell. By the way, we haven't been naming these as we go, and layers can be renamed, which I generally try to do for myself, leave myself some breadcrumbs so that when I open this later, or maybe I send this file to someone else. I've got my awesome shadow box, but I send it to another person who can maybe draw with the pen tool a little better than me, and go, hey, will you do a better job on that seashell? Can you fix this for me? What people generally hate to see is all of this, a lot of layers with no information. So let's talk about that now. And we'll keep going back to the layers palette throughout the course. But for now, let's just talk about good housekeeping. We've saved this file. We did the artwork. Let's clean this up a little bit. Let's make this something that will be easier to view and manipulate down the road if we open this file a year from now, or give it to someone else and make things a little bit cleaner and easier for them. So we can rename anything by double clicking on the words layer. They don't have to be called layer anything. They can be called whatever you want. So by double clicking, I get that little blue highlight in there, and I can call this base art or even shadow box. Great, like so. And I happen to know the sand dollar is on the bottom here, so I'm just going to rename all these really quick. Sand dollar. And I don't know what these are. I can kind of tell what they are based on the preview, maybe what shape they are, but I may have to just A/B the eyeball. Okay, there's my guy right there. So layer 5 is actually my golden ratio seashell. Okay, I hit enter key, that commits the type change. Sometimes I'm not sure which layer it is. So what's easy is to, using the move tool, if you right click on a layer, it tells you what it is. It's the top one. It's actually 2 layers here. There's the shadow box, and then, which is underneath it, and then there's layer 3. So I know that that muscle is layer 3, and now I can go back and type muscle. Okay. And where are we here? So where's the coral? Coral was layer 4. Again, I just right click and I get the name and I call that coral. The 2 R's in coral? Yeah, who knows? All right, we're moving on. Over here, this is our goofy plate. I just right click again with the move tool selected. That was layer 2. Fantastic. We're going to say plate. Again, this is just good common sense housekeeping. Okay, so I know what all this stuff is, and I'm going to call that the screw. And now everything is nice and labeled. If I open this up later and I'm like, I gotta drop the sand dollar out and put something else back in there, I can do so. So that's great. I hit save. Those will all be there when I come back and reopen this file. That's fantastic. Okay, so now everything is nice and labeled. And like I was saying, if I messed up something and did something terrible to him, like so, and left that alone, I'll come back and realize I screwed that up, and I would go back here, and I've got the base art here at the bottom. I can return to and restore, cut that out again and restore this guy. But we did a good job. We got all these things in here. So I don't need these guys, these yahoos down here anymore. So how do I get rid of this stuff? And again, I use the copy command for that purpose. So I would have a backup of it. There was no reason to delete them right off the bat. I always try to retain copies whenever necessary. So what do I do here? So there's a few different ways we can do it. This is all on the base art. So if I go to the shadow box where all that stuff lives, yep, there it is. I can delete all of this if I want. So I use the marquee tool again. This is a very quick way to do it. And I just grab all this and I hit delete. Okay, that's fine. But I have all this blank space. And the final dimensions of my image include that blank space. That's part of the image dimensions down here. If I go click on this little guy right here, document dimensions, it is still large. It is 1670 wide by 1825 tall. That's still a very tall image. Just by deleting this portion and leaving it transparent does not mean that that area is not included in the image dimensions. It is. That is still part of the canvas. Right? We talked about the canvas earlier. That is still part of this physical image down there. We haven't gotten rid of it completely. We actually need to shrink the overall size of the file. Now, I don't have to delete that like I just did. That's actually unnecessary, but I want to show you different ways to actually shrink this thing up. We don't want to go to image size, okay? Because image size, all that's going to do is actually shrink the whole thing. And oh, but you say, well, John, just uncouple width from height and just make the height smaller. Is that going to be good? No, because watch what happens. I just squeezed it. I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to make that more extreme. If I, again, image size, make the height. Again, I uncouple or actually unlink height from width, keep the width the same, make that about half. That's no bueno. That's not what I wanted. I didn't want to squash the image. I wanted to crop it. Okay, so that's wrong. We don't use image size for that. Oh, I know. We'll use canvas size. Sure, we can do canvas size. So I go to image canvas size, and let's make that height. I'm just guessing here. So I don't know. Let's make it 1200. Okay, and I don't want to shrink from the center because that's going to crop the top and the bottom. I don't want that. Undo. Go to canvas size. And I want to go, so I'll set that again, 900. I want the anchor point, I want it to shrink from the bottom, which means my anchor point is at the top, and any manipulations I make will be shrunk from below. So I hit OK. And where's my zoom thing? There we go. And chat here. Oh, there's my chat. Hi, John. Have a really fun night. Thank you. See you tomorrow. Jessica, thank you very much. I will see you tomorrow, and come in with any questions you have. Otherwise, we'll start again tomorrow at 6 p.m. and we'll get into some more fun stuff. Have a good night. We're almost done here. So, okay, so going back over here. Again, that cropped it too much, and I lost a lot of image, which I'm not happy about. So again, undo. Okay, so now I'm here. Wouldn't it be nice if there was a way to visually see the crop? to get rid of what I don't want? Sure there is. There is our friend. 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth one down, this guy right here. That is crop tool. Now, when I select the crop tool, there is a physical tool here, right? That looks like him, and I can actually draw with that tool. But right off the bat, there are markers. I'll just deselect that. When I first select the crop tool, notice what happens to the image. These little black icons appear in all of the corners and in the middle. That will change the size of the canvas, but it's doing it in a visual way, and I get these nice grid lines in case I want to kind of line things up or do it proportionally or do kind of a master grid that's using the rule of thirds, for example. There's different ways to use this grid if you want when you're doing photographs, but right now it's visually showing me what I'm going to get rid of. The white portion is going to stay and the gray portion is going to go. In this case, I want to leave a little bit of border white at the bottom, so because I want that top white and the bottom white to be about the same. I'm going to use that grid to help me, and I can actually shave just off the top of that original sand dollar, like so. And how do I commit? Our friend the enter tool always commits. Okay, so now I've just committed that crop, and again, go undo. That is the crop tool here. And I can just drag from the corners or from below, okay? And go like this. And the other option instead of enter is to double click, and now I've committed that crop. So I've just got this guy right here, the remnants of our old friend from 3 hours ago, the wood screw. He's jamming me up down here. I don't like that. So how do I get rid of him? Now I don't want to delete that. And where is that, right? That is on a shadow box. Yeah, okay, there. If I A-B that layer, I can tell that that's part of that layer. Now, if I use my marquee tool and I hit delete, I'm stuck with transparency, which again, I don't want. I want that to be actually white. I want to see white there. So that's not going to work. So what do? We can use the fill command to add color like we did much earlier this evening. Using the fill command with a marquee selection adds color inside the marquee, inside those boundaries. In this case, I don't want black, I want white. All right, so how do I do that? I go under fill, and again, I've selected that portion of the shadow box layer that contains the original artwork I want to get rid of. And I go under edit, fill. And in my example here, I have black and white on my, my color palette over here. We haven't really talked about this yet. The topmost square is what's known as the foreground color, which means that the bottom square is the background color. You can have two colors loaded simultaneously in Photoshop, and you can pick between the two when you're doing fills or paints and things like that, and switch back and forth pretty quickly. That's kind of nice and handy, certainly for this case, just to have black and white loaded, but let's say you have two other colors loaded, and you can just swap back and forth pretty quickly when you're doing things like with paintbrushes, for example. So in this case, I want to fill not with the foreground, but with the background color. And actually, it's black and white. Even if I had foreground, two different colors in here, I always have black or white as an option down here at the bottom. These are evergreen. These are always here. Or 50% gray if I want, which might be handy. So in this case, I just go background color because it's already white. Hit OK. And boom, there it was. And I deselect by, again, Command D. And that's gone. And now I have erased that portion of the shadow box. And there we go. And now when I hit save, okay, I have a much smaller image. And now I can see my image is 1670 by 1069 down here in the bottom left, or I can double check that under image size to see my new dimensions. Okay, pretty cool. I'm gonna link those back together because I don't like that. And again, that resolution here doesn't matter. That's a quick review for the beginning of the evening. Michael, I'm not sure if you were here for this, but we talked about, as a quick recap, when we're dealing with digital artwork, and in this case, we're not printing this item. We're dealing with physical artwork. The physical dimensions matter over the pixels. So in this case, if we're gonna, and you have to, it's good to decide this in advance. If you think you're ever gonna print anything you're doing, or if print is automatically your intention, under image size, you wanna make sure you're working in something like inches or centimeters. And for print, unless you're doing it at home and maybe going to an inkjet printer, which actually are not typically high resolution. For the longest time, you can get away with 200 as the resolution for an inkjet. But in this case, we're going to stick with 300. So at 300 pixels per inch, right, the physical size of this piece is 5.5 inches wide by 3.5 inches tall, which is not that big in the grand scheme of things. Certainly not as big as, say, an 8x10 photograph or whatever. You can make it an 8x10, but if we, and again, I mentioned this earlier, garbage in, garbage out, you cannot increase the size of an image and expect it to retain its resolution, because that's the downside of a raster image in Photoshop. You can't add to it. You can subtract, but you can't add more. So I can't go in and make this 8x10. It's going to look lousy. So at 300 DPI, which is a standard printing resolution and kind of the lowest, kind of the bottom minimum spec for printing, for physical printing outside of this, you're kind of stuck at 300. You can certainly go up higher, but if you go up higher, you're going to get not so great. So it's going to be 300, and that is the image size that you're stuck with for that resolution. But if you're not printing, again, you don't need to worry about a physical dimension. You just have to worry about the pixels. In this case, it is 1670 by 1069. And if I change the resolution, it's going to change the pixel size. And again, I will again demonstrate this just to make sure we're all clear. The image size is 5 megabytes. If I change and the width was 1670. So if I change this to 72, notice by dropping the resolution, I've made this much, much smaller. If I set this back to where it was, 1670, notice the file size is the same, because again, that resolution is for physical use, printing, and has nothing to do with the digital world. What matters are these two numbers here and here. You can put this number whatever you want, but you're setting the pixel values for the width and the height. The resolution really doesn't matter. This, when I first opened this, it was set to 300, and it's still the exact same file size at 72 that it was at 300. Okay, so here we are there, and I hit save. And okay, so as we go on, so we got a little time left here. If you guys have questions, I actually managed to get the chat window in its own window. So I'll see if you ask a question. So if you want to ask anything while we finish up here, feel free just to go ahead and ask it in chat, and I will answer it when I see it pop up. I get a notification now. Okay, so I hit save, and great. So that image is now saved, and we can close it like so. Boom. Lots of cool stuff going on there. Okay, great. So while I open up the next image here, if you have a question, go ahead and throw it in chat, and I will go ahead and answer it. But we just hit save here. Let's go back and reopen this file. Let's finish our kind of Photoshop 101 here. So we've got our image. I just reopened it, and we've got our image here. And notice, by the way, so by reopening it, look what happened. So the history palette is now cleansed, right? Because the history resets every time we close an image. It's gone. So all of those undos that we have are now missing, because that slate gets wiped clean the minute you save and close. So that's one of the things that changes when you close a document. So, and the other thing is that that path we made is still there. Now, where is it? It's actually off screen because we were drawing it down below. Let's see if we can find it. Let's see. Nope, it's hidden. Oh, no, I see it. There we go. So that path is off screen, but that path is saved, and I can pull it around, and it's saved in the spot that it was when we made it. So if I do this, I can pull it back up again. And actually I want to do, whoops, sorry, I just want to grab it and use the move tool, and I'll move that path, whoops, back up. Oh, come on, sucker. Hello. Go here. There we are. Yeah, there's the path tool. I can put it back on top of the seashell like so. Okay, but the idea was the path we made that we saved, obviously came along with the project, and the layers are still there and the names are still there. So that's what all got saved when we saved the document. And by hitting save, what format is it in? It is by default a Photoshop document, a .psd. That's what that means. That's what it was when we first started it. So it is just saving as the same format. What if we want to save it as another format? So we'll finish up with that here tonight. So if I go to File if I hit save, it's just going to save as the exact same image type that it was. And in this case, I know I've saved it. There's no asterisks there. We're good. If I go to save as, I now have the option in this format. Again, I'm in folder 4, selecting and moving. There's my picture frame. I can make this something besides a Photoshop. And there's different things in here. You don't need to know what all of these mean necessarily. The big ones, of course, are JPEG, which we're all pretty familiar with. That's what most images on the web are, or PNG. And there's a difference between the two, for sure. And then there's some older versions of JPEG, JPEG 2000. You could make a PDF directly out of Photoshop if you want right here. We'll just save as a Photoshop PDF. And that can be brought into Acrobat, for example, and manipulated further. If you want, you can save it as a raw file. And some of these are very old. So BMPs, they're not used much anymore. There's actually a GIF, a static GIF, as opposed to the GIF that we all know and love with goofy moving parts. But the original GIFs were actually just static images. And you can do larger format files like a TIFF. If you want to, for example, retain the maximum amount of information, but save it as a different type of file that someone doesn't necessarily need Photoshop to open, you could save it as a TIFF file. And TIFF, one of the advantages there is that TIFF files can contain layers. You see, I actually have a layer checkbox here. All these boxes change depending on what I select. So if I go to JPEG, the layers are all grayed out. All this stuff is grayed out, and I have this embed color profile here where I embed the color profile that I'm working in. That's one of the few things I can select. If I go to PNG, for example, see nothing's changed. I can go to Photoshop EPS, and I can actually set a different proof setup for that. That's more for printing. So you see the options change depending on what you select down here. The main ones we'll focus on, and again, some of these, if you know what it is, it's because you work in that and you have to save to that. But if you're going to ask me, is there any benefit for you as a home user or in your video business to save it as a Cytex CT, I would say no. There's no benefit to that. There's no magic bullet in here that's like, make this thing a quarter of the size and retain all of its editing properties. It's not there. You're good with just good old-fashioned Photoshop. And Photoshop has some internal compression that will make the file smaller than what it appears to be in the document in terms of the actual file size. Photoshop is fine. If you're working with massively large files, really huge dimensions, they actually have a format for that called large document format. And that is a PSB. At the top, you see the suffix changes here on the file name. It will be a PSB if it's a massive file. Don't use that format unless it really is a big file. I'm not sure where the boundaries are. It's not something like an 11 by 17 poster or anything like that. It's more like a 400-inch, 500-inch poster, something like that. So again, only use that if you know you need it. But the main things we're going to talk about, either Photoshop, and again, a TIFF file is sort of like a Photoshop file, but you don't need Photoshop to open it, and it can contain layers. You normally use those for printing. Generally, we used to send printers the TIFF files all the time. That's what they're used to seeing. It's very low compression and retains as much of the image information as possible while making it a much smaller file size. And if you turn off the layers, it will make it even smaller, and you can see it will save it as a copy. And so it'll have to it'll name it something else. And by doing so, it will not overwrite the original image with its PSD file name. So that's all well and good, but mostly what we save to are JPEG or PNG. And you can certainly do that from within the save as function here. And if I select JPEG, for example, I hit save, and then this pops up because JPEGs are compressed, and it's going to ask me, well, by how much? And it gives me a quality slider here, and you can jump that between these options: low, medium, high. You can see there's a number value associated with these, and you have a preview, a dynamic preview right here of how big this file is going to be when I'm done with it. Okay, so even at maximum, it is 0.5 MB in size compared to the original, which is, I believe, 6 MB. So that's pretty good. And that is maximum, which generally gives you an image that's fairly close to the original in most ways. I can crank this all the way to the end, and it will be a meg. So that's pretty good. And these here, these days, you probably want to leave everything as baseline standard. These other two are actually old and deprecated. I'm not sure what baseline optimize is for anymore. And you can see it makes things a little bit smaller, but not by much. And progressive is a much, much older file format, which we used to use for the web, again, showing how old I am, where an image, because we are all on dial-up, and an image would pull up and it would slowly fill itself in. The details would slowly come out of the image, but it would load a low-res preview. It would be progressively adding resolution as it loaded, which is really not the case anymore in modern web, and they should probably just get rid of this, but here it is for those, maybe someone somewhere in the world is still struggling with dial-up, in which case they may actually need this for their website. But baseline standard, pretty good here. The preview box will actually, let's see if we can get it to do its thing. It's not doing much. Let's see, it's not really working. I'm trying to A/B this. I'm just trying to get a sense of I can still zoom in, by the way. So while I'm in the save function, I can go in and see, yeah, there you go. I have to zoom in. So by clicking preview, I can see the effect that my JPEG compression is having on the image. Like so, you can see, look here. I'm going to A/B preview. See that? See how all that detail is getting disastrously destroyed here. Okay. So, and then if I crank it up higher, and the thing with JPEGs, and there are cases where you obviously don't want to save it so massive, because at the higher end, you're adding too much file size without really adding any extra detail. So you want to try to find the sweet spot to where it looks as much like the original as possible. That's pretty close. I can see it a little bit here. I'm going to slide a little bit more. I can barely see the difference now. And that's at an 8, okay, out of 12. Generally, once you get into, that's roughly, what is that, 75, 80%. Once you get in that arena, you're pretty good. I can keep manipulating this image, moving it around just to A/B different parts of it. That looks pretty good. Some of the gradation's not so great. Maybe I'll just jump this to 9 just to be safe. But again, 372 kilobytes, all right? Not too shabby. I'm gonna hit OK, save that. That's the old school way of doing it, actually. And Michael, again, to your question, are all the versions the same? At some point, I believe in the last 3 versions, so maybe going back to 2017 or earlier, I can't remember when they added this, there is a new save as function, because web graphics had come so far that they anticipated that 9 times out of 10, what people were using Photoshop for and saving things out of Photoshop for were for the web or for purely digital purposes, in which case they were saving PNGs and JPEGs more than anything else. There are shortcuts for those now built in. So instead of save as, there is now an export command, okay? And that used to be called save for web. You notice that says legacy. There are some menu items that are still part of Photoshop to this day that they've kept around because maybe people are used to it. Again, it all comes down to muscle memory. That used to be called save for web. That is, the new name for it is export as. And I believe, again, that was added sometime in the last 3 versions. So what can we do with that? We export as. That brings up a new dialog box. And this is what Adobe has been pushing as the way to export files, especially if you're doing JPEGs. And I have file settings here. This list is limited to JPEGs, PNGs, GIFs, or SVG graphics, which is scalable vector graphics, I believe. I'm not sure what the S stands for. But you see actual vector graphics on the web. You might use that out of Illustrator. It's not really going to be very useful here because, again, we're not dealing with vector art. I can select PNG if I want, or in this case, that's not going to do me much good. So I'm going to go to JPEG. And again, I'm getting a dynamic preview over here of how big this will be. And PNGs are, if you weren't aware, PNG files are actually not as heavily compressed as JPEGs. There's actually no compression slider whatsoever. It tries to retain as much information as possible and doesn't allow you to set a compression level. It does it automatically to retain almost a one-to-one how the original image looked as much as possible, and stripping out information that you're not going to see. That's kind of the benefits of PNGs. They can be really small and they look amazing. The downside is they're not as small as JPEGs. With compression, you can see this image is 2 megabytes, which is kind of big for a web graphic in general. The other things about PNGs is they can hold transparency. They can hold an alpha channel. So I'm going to hit cancel here. let's say we want to have our shadow box completely by itself without this white around it. And I can hide that. So let's just do that real quickly. I select that white with my magic wand and I hit delete. And yeah, I know there's a drop shadow there. That's not the right way to do that, but let's just pretend that that drop shadow is nice and perfectly blended for now. I'll zoom in a little bit. Okay, I've taken the white out and I'm gonna go up back on here under export, again, export as, and you can see the preview here. Wait for that to load. If I turn off transparency, if the transparency is on, I'm going to get that image the same way I did. There's going to be that little bit of border of empty dead pixels around this. And if I drop this image on a website on top of, say, a color, the web page is blue, that blue will show through in all these transparent areas, and I'll just see the shadow box on top of it. Maybe I want that kind of transparency. PNGs can hold transparency. That's one of the major benefits of using a PNG file, especially, let's say you're going from Photoshop to, say, video, and you've created a lower third or a logo bug or something, and you want the video to show through in the parts of the image that don't contain any information. You would use a PNG, and you would have that type of transparency or an alpha channel, as it's known in the video world, automatically baked into the image. That's the benefit of a PNG. If you don't have any transparency, there's no reason to use the PNG. And if I turn that off, you can see that that image is going to be white around the edges. And the actual file size jumped slightly with the transparency on than it did with it off, just a little bit. But I don't want a PNG. I'm going to go to JPEG here. And again, I have my sliders now, and I can change the quality here from. Now, this is different. They've changed the way that they do the quality. There's no medium, high, best, whatever. There's 10%, 20%, and so on. They've changed it to a quality number system. Some people don't like that. That's why that legacy window is in there, because I believe it uses the old method of low, medium, high, best. But here you actually have a slider you can use to change it to the numbers. And you notice that there was a dynamic preview in here, and I can zoom in like so and see the effect. Again, a live preview. I'll drop that to 10%. And I can zoom in. I'll go into my team. There we go. There's that blockiness. I'm using the hand tool. They automatically changed to the hand tool, which is nice. I'm getting that nasty blockiness in here. And as I jack this up higher, I get the effect that I want to see. Okay, so that's nice. And so I'll leave that at 80. That seems pretty good. I'll zoom back out. And that image compared, remember that PNG was 2.5 megabytes. This is 573 kilobytes. So again, that's the benefit of the JPEG. Now here, there's more options in this window than a standard save as. I can actually make this file size smaller if I need to. So I'm going to set this image size to half of its normal size. And it's scaled automatically, or there's a scale option here that was at 47%. I can make that 50. I can fit right now in one go, rather than save this as a JPEG, reopen it in Photoshop and resize it. Because let's say the client is like, I love the image you made. The shadow box is great. It's too big for my web page. Can you shrink that down? It's too large. Okay, I can do that right now, right here in this export as window and resize it. Or they're like, yeah, you know what? We need a little buffer. We need more white around it. There wasn't enough white around it. I can do this and actually give it more of the canvas. This is goes back to the canvas size menu here, just like we were in Photoshop, but I'm doing this in the export window and I'm not affecting the original image in any way. This is just for this export. The other nice thing about the export window is it can do multiple exports at the same time. It's almost like a batch function. And what I mean by that is over here, I see this is the name of my file. This is going to a JPEG. That's the size. Look at this guy right up here. There's a plus sign. I click that and I have another size to work with here. And another size I keep adding, keep adding, keep adding. And what it's asking me is, what is this other piece going to be? This one is going to be at half the size. It's going to multiply by 0.5 like that. And there will be a second image that is half the size of this image on export. This one will be 3/4 the size, 0.75. This will be 1/4 the size right here. And the suffix is saying that this is what's going to be added to the end of the file name, 05, 07, 0,2025x. If I don't want one of those, let's say I don't want the 1/4 size, I click the trash can, that goes away. All right. So that's pretty nice. So now I can do all of that in one go. I'm going to hit export all. and it's going to ask me where do you want them to go. In that folder is fine. Open, and that's it. That quick. Go back out to the Finder here really quickly. Let's see if we can find that file. And my hard drive is a mess, so excuse me here. Let's go to and I'll go into Photoshop 101 image files for class and selecting and moving. There we go. And now I'm just going to isolate that really quick. There they are. There is my original Photoshop document, which was almost 10 megabytes. There is the original JPEG that I made. And then these are the two that I made in the export as window. This one is half the size. This one is 3/4 of the size. And you can see the corresponding numbers here. This is the Big Daddy original. I'll just use the quick view in the macOS Finder here. This is the original of Photoshop, and these are the two that were scaled on export. So again, that's a really nice feature of the export as, to do a huge batch all in one go, different sizes of the image in case that's what your webmaster or the client wants. They want to have multiple sizes for different purposes. That's a quick and easy way to do that. So that kind of covered the basics here. I hope that was a good night one intro. We covered the workspace in general. We talked about a few of the tools, gave you the lay of the land, workspaces, and we touched briefly on the layers panel. We will get more into layers in the rest of the class for sure. There's a lot to talk about in there, but the big thing was to cover the basics of image size, moving things. I'm going to stop the screen share here. Go back to my my tired mug here. We covered image size and also selecting and manipulating all various elements of a page. And moving them around and getting used to comfortable to selecting, which is kind of the basis of a lot of Photoshop work, is just selecting, just grabbing the part of the image that you want and then how to manipulate it from there. Guys, if you have any more questions, go ahead and ask them now. And I'll wait here for a second. And for those of you who have tuned in live all night, thank you so much for coming. And again, I hope you got something out of this. If you enjoy what you saw, you want to take the rest of the course, go to keycodeeducation.com, sign up for the class. If it's too late to grab it, jump in this one. Check their calendar for the next available Photoshop course coming up. If you are not new to Photoshop and you want to learn some higher end tricks, tips and tricks that are a little more advanced, keep your eyes out for a Photoshop 201 course. That is level 2. Guys, any questions before we sign off here? Anything you want to cover? Same link for tomorrow. Yes, that should be the same link for tomorrow. If it is not, let the key code find people there know, and we will figure it all out. But I believe it's the same link, and I will. Great, no questions. Okay, thank you, Joe, and thanks for coming. Appreciate that. Michael, anything you want me to cover? Because you jumped in a little bit late. I can hang here for a few more minutes if you want me to go back on anything. I'm not sure where you came in. I'm sorry. I was kind of deep in the middle of it. So if you want me to cover something again, totally fine. Totally up to you. Otherwise, we can keep going tomorrow. This is the part where I dance. Not really. Oh, no. Okay. Is everything okay with your computer? 45 late. Okay. I'm trying to think where we were. I think we were, okay, good. I'm glad that that was okay. I hate that when that happens. No worries. Okay. We covered, what were we in the middle of when you came in? Do you remember what I was doing? I can't remember where I was at 45 in. I think I was still lecturing, but. Had the image up. Okay, so a few things that I covered here. I'll go back to my slides here if I can get that up here, and I will share that screen. So I started with some basics about Photoshop here, and let me pull that back up here. I'll go back to my share screen, and I will jump into this and hit share. And I'm gonna go back over here. I'm gonna hit play, and there we go. Okay, so where were we here? So I think I was much further back. I'm going to my navigator. So I started here, basics. Okay, so we talked about, let's see, we did raster versus vector. Let's see. Yep. RGB versus CMYK, destructive versus non-destructive. Okay, so I'll go back. So raster versus vector. Michael, in case you're not familiar, we just talked about that briefly. I did show some examples while we were working, but the idea is with vector images, which are mostly generated by programs like Adobe Illustrator or CAD programs, for example, it's all drawing with lines. It's all math. It's just the computer connecting point A to point B, either with a straight line or with a curve. And vector images can be scaled pretty much infinitely from the tiniest postage stamp size all the way up to the side of a building. That's the beauty of a vector image. They're not great for photographs because that's not a collection of lines and shapes. That's a collection of gradations and pixels and colors, and they don't lend themselves well to vector shapes. So that's more of a raster image, or also known as a bitmap. That's where we work in the Photoshop world, is a raster imaging program. It can contain some vector information, and we'll touch on that later in the class, but basically it is a raster image program. And vector images you would create in Illustrator. And I had the example up of a logo, which I'll show you here in a second, which has cleaner lines and shows you really shows you the power of a vector image versus a raster image. The other thing is RGB versus CMYK. Again, I've talked about printing tonight a little bit in the sense that we're not going to cover it a lot because it's a specialized thing. If you know you need to print, then you know what these things mean. You're dealing with physical document sizes. That's where the image resolution really matters. That's where the physical dimensions matter, and also the color space matters. RGB is the color of available light, additive light hitting our retinas from our screens, from the sun, from the world around us. That's RGB. It's visible light. That's what all our devices emit. CMYK is on paper. CMYK is printed colors. CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Don't ask me why they didn't use B. It's K. So those are actually representative of the inks. And if you've ever bought ink for your inkjet, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Those are the four colors normally that are the base colors for all inkjet printers. Real life representations of colors can print with a combination of those four. CMYK is a smaller color gamut, and you generally don't work in CMYK unless you know you really need to when you're manipulating those colors for press. But you need a calibrated monitor and all that kind of stuff. So let's not talk about that. But essentially, for what we're doing for digital purposes, photographs, web art, video, we deal with the RGB color space. You can always convert to CMYK if you are going to print. And in fact, a lot of printers will do that for you. You can send them an RGB file, and it'll be converted automatically in the software when you go to print something. And the other thing we talked about very briefly was destructive versus non-destructive. And I think you saw some of that as we moved through the class. The idea of saving the layers as we went, making copies of the layers to physically manipulate them so that we can always go back to the original in case we destroyed it. We want to work non-destructively in Photoshop as much as possible. And Photoshop has come a long way since the original version, which was all destructive. There were no layers. It was a nightmare. You had to make a change and be happy with it and commit before you hit save. And now you have way more options. And the idea is to preserve as many editing capabilities down the road as possible by not making a hard choice and baking it into the image. So it's destructive versus non-destructive. And I touched on this briefly. When do you want to use Photoshop? Graphics for the web, for video, for print, absolutely. Great use for Photoshop. We're working with photographs, absolutely. Again, Adobe Lightroom is an option there if you want to have a library of photographs and you don't want to do heavy manipulation like you do in Photoshop. You just maybe want to adjust camera raw values if you know what those are. That's where you might use Adobe Lightroom instead for your photography. Posters, postcards, simple documents that are one page. Absolutely can use Photoshop for that. You don't want to use it for logos, for vector art, CAD art, or big, giant, complex documents with multiple pages, like a brochure or a book. It's not well suited for that. It's where you would use a product like Adobe InDesign or Quark Express. Okay, and again, I mentioned logos. It's better as vector, at least depending on the type of logo that you're using. And you can do a little bit of video editing and animation inside Photoshop without going to another program. But in general, I prefer Premiere Pro and After Effects for that type of work, or whatever editor you want to use. But you can actually edit video in Photoshop if you want to. And then we moved on to the application. So I'll get out of this and we'll go back to Photoshop. And let's see, where are we? And Oh, I'll do this, and then I will jump back into, where are we here in the chat? Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again and go back into Photoshop, and there we go. Share. Okay, and I'm going to close this image that we've been working on all night. Do you want to save it? Sure. It's always nice enough to ask. And we just touched on the basics of the screen. So if you're on the home page, the home section of Photoshop, after you open it, you will see all the images you've been working on. There may only be one image here because you maybe just started the program fresh. In this case, I have a lot of older stuff in here. The Learn tab actually gives you quick little videos you can select from. These are all little training videos. Most of them are pretty short. And if you have a question, maybe you can go and dive into here and it'll be answered in some of these guys. We're going to cover a lot of the basics here in this class, but in case you want to refresh down the road, the Learning tab is a great place to go. And then if you do use Adobe Lightroom in conjunction with Photoshop, you can actually open your Lightroom library right here in Photoshop, pick an image and open it directly from your Lightroom right into Photoshop, save it, goes right back into Lightroom. You can then create a new or an open. So if we go to create new, this is where all these presets live here. I've got ones that I've saved, and then these are built for you that Adobe has made. So various photo sizes, 7x5, 3x2, 6x4, 7x5. If you click on that plus key, you can see more down here, kind of hides that little splash. And there's 8x10 down there at the bottom. And again, these are physical sizes because maybe you're going to make an image or manipulate an image to fit an 8x10 picture frame. And you want a nice 8x10 image at 300 pixels per inch, which again is a good size for printing. In this case, you're definitely working with photographs that you want to reproduce physically. So that's where that resolution and that physical size comes in handy. And you can see on the right hand under preset, those numbers dynamically change based on the preset that you set here. You see the size changing, and it automatically defaults to inches, and it's telling me how many pixels per inch. That's a really nice resolution to start with, and you can jack this up. The idea is if you're gonna if you know you want this image to even have higher quality, you need to enter the new numbers now before you make this thing and not after. You can't add resolution once something has already been baked into that size. So if you need a much larger, more robust image resolution wise, you need to type that number in now before you hit create. And if you keep going, you can see various web sizes. And again, the resolution drops to 72 because you don't need 300 ppi for a web image. And as I showed with the document size earlier, the document size does not need to reflect any physical size. It needs to reflect pixel size, the overall pixels, in this case, 1366 by 768. That will not change even if we jack this resolution up. It's not going to add anything to it. It's fixed at that pixel size. So generally the screen resolution for things like web, film and video, and even mobile is locked in at 72, and you can leave that alone. Adding to that number is not going to add any quality to the image. And with film and video, for example, if you're working in film and video, you've got common presets in here. Here's 1080 HD. And if you reveal the presets, you can go all the way up to 4K. And again, these are just things they've built, and I can make my own. And then by clicking this button right here, it's a little down arrow pointing at what I think is supposed to be a hard drive or a computer. It will show up here in the saved presets window right here. That's one I saved earlier tonight. These are all custom ones that I've made. Again, I have my Instagram presets in here and one for 5K video, which was not included in the original package. So if I do that and I hit create, then I've got my image. And the last thing, Michael, we kind of covered was just the basic lay of the land before we open that first image, was just telling you where things are at. Obviously, we have our toolbar here on the left, and we covered probably the first 4 or 5 tools in here tonight. This is the application frame. If you open multiple images, they will just appear in tabs, and you just pop back and forth between them. It's telling me that, and this is information about the document I just opened. It's not titled yet, has not been saved. It's at 50% scale. It's an RGB file, and it's 8-bit. I generally create my imagery at 8-bit unless I know I want super high quality, in which case I might do a 16-bit for high-end animation work, or 32-bit, but you're not going to get a lot out of 32-bit or 16-bit usually if you're just kind of doing smaller projects or stuff for yourself, or even for certain web applications. You don't need 16-bit for certain video frames. So you don't need to jack up the bit rate. That just makes the file size larger without necessarily adding much to it. And then at the top here, this is known as the options bar. And again, that's where we set things like the tolerance, and that will change depending on the tool. Those are shortcuts. If you don't see that, that is in window options. There's 3 options down here. And again, if you don't see your tools, that's where you select your tools. And any open documents will also be available here at the bottom. There would be more listed if I had more open documents. And then we just have our various windows or palettes over here. They're called windows in the frame. I tend to prefer to call them palettes. There's 2 palette bars here. Kind of the main one, which is docked to the far right, generally holds things like layers, channels, paths, colors, swatches, things like that. Those are generally there. It's nice and wide, and you can pop back and forth between them like so. And you can move things. So if I grab by the name, it tears off, and then the blue tells me where it's going to go. So in this case, if I want to make it a tab next to adjustments, I just did that. And now swatches is next to adjustments. If I drag it back up, the blue line will actually dock swatches between those 2 palettes. Let's say I want all 3 to be in the same palette just to clean things up. I just drag, drag, drag. There we go. Boom, boom, boom. They're all next to each other. That's nice and great. Anytime I see these kind of dark, if you can tell on my screen, these darker lines here mean that I can move the palettes up like so, or make it wider or skinnier like this. Okay, pulling it out. And by double clicking on the tab, it collapses the entire palette set so that I can just focus on what I want to see. If you had all the palettes open, this whole area would be chaos. So this is a nice way to kind of shrink everything up. Just see what you want to see. And let me pop back out to chat. You have a question, and there you are. Yes, you can customize this for your most used tools. That's a great way to put it. The things you use the most, put here. If you don't see it, go under window, and I don't see a clone source, for example. So I'm going to pull that up. Generally, when you add a new window, it pops up in this second bar here. This is kind of a second palette window, but it is collapsed. And the only thing, the reason why you're seeing these pictograms instead of a name is because it's a skinny bar. If I drag it out, it looks like the other one, and I can do this, but they pop out, the tabs pop out to the left like this instead of popping below. So that's the difference between these 2 palettes. And you can still move things back and forth. I can put this guy over here if I want, or tear it off and use his own window. But in this case, I'm going to put him back where he belongs. So that's the idea. And you can click and drag and reorganize these things. And this window doesn't have to be this wide. You can shrink it back like so, just by pulling it, and it becomes just the symbol. If you get used to what these symbols are, then you know what this means. I know, for example, that that is my character palette. This is history, which tells me everything that I've done since I opened it. And I click it and then click it back. It flies in and out when you click on the pictogram. And these little double arrows at the top, again, this is a lot of gray on gray. Sometimes it's hard to see. This double arrow pops the whole palette out so that it works like its cousin right next door to it. And then the arrow pops it back. The same arrow is also available on that. And you can really shrink this up. This is better for a small screen, maybe. This guy's a rogue. I'll just get rid of him. If you're working on a laptop and not a lot of real estate, you really want to see your image. Maybe you want to skinny up these palettes like this. And then this whole arrangement, no matter what windows you pick, is known as what's called a workspace. And workspace is a term used all across the entire Adobe ecosystem. Workspaces exist in Premiere. They exist in After Effects. They exist in Illustrator. I think they exist even in Dreamweaver, definitely in InDesign. There's different workspaces. Those are collections of different tools. So for example, if I go to Essentials, that's what Adobe thinks the essentials are. If I go to Graphics and Web, and see it's customizing my palettes. And I actually have, if I go to Motion, it's added a video timeline across bottom. Remember I said you could edit video in Photoshop. That's where you do it. This is a video timeline like you would get in an editor. Not as good, but it's down there. And see, it automatically adjusted the entire workspace depending on what I picked. But let's say I get this configured the way I want it. I save it with my name, and it goes back to what I wanted it to be. And how did I do that? I went under Window, Workspace, and I go New Work. Once I get everything set up, I go New Workspace. All right, like so. And this could be John's Workspace 2, for example. I'll call it my skinny workspace because I like how all the palettes look. And there we go. And I'm going to save my menus in the toolbar. And there it is. And now that is available right there as an option. And I can always, if I change it and I messed with it and I want to set it back the way it was, there's a reset option. and I can also delete what I don't want. And I don't know if there's a practical limit to how many you can add. You can have as many as you want in this palette. And I use this in Premiere all the time. It's a big thing in Premiere because the workspaces totally dictate the flow of all the panels. And I have 5 or 6 custom ones that I use in addition to the ones that came with it in that program. And certainly you can do the same thing here in Photoshop. So it's just a matter of determining what tools you need. If it's not visible, you go into the window setting and you just call up the one that you're missing. You go to notes and there it is. It adds it and it's good to go. And I collapse it back in. And if I want to get rid of it, I just click on this menu and I go close and it's gone. Okay, so pretty handy. That was pretty much it. I think you came in right after that. So that's we talked about workspace customization, and yeah, I think that was the deal. So congrats, you're all caught up. Any further questions before we sign off? Cool, amazing. Thank you very much. This has been great. I've had a good time. Thank you, and I will see you back here again tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Again, I think it's the same link. If it's not, we'll all talk. We'll figure it out. Michael, have an amazing night, and I will see you again tomorrow. And I think everyone else is gone, so I'll sign off. Everyone else is still sticking around for the live stream. It's been great. Appreciate you all for coming, and I will see you, my classmates, tomorrow. And for the rest of you, again, keycodeeducation.com if you want to take the rest of this course or take the whole course again on a future date. That's me. It's 10:15 on a Friday night, and I need to take a break. So good night, all.